Ever since Barkus stepped foot into the first settlement, he couldn't help but be engrossed in the culture and lifestyle that Reborn had brought into this territory. He loved the bathhouses, he loved the very welcoming and accommodating Rebornians who helped him without any complaints or expectations of rewards, and he loved that people were enjoying and playing board games together in one room. It was the kind of camaraderie and friendship between people that he had never seen before. And even though he had never visited other Reborn territories, it was easy to guess that it probably had the same vibe and culture as the first settlement. In fact, from the stories he heard, it seemed that those territories were much better than he could have ever thought possible. He realized that what Reborn brought was something precious. It could not be replicated by him or anyone else even if he tried. However, he just couldn't help but feel that it was a waste. It was clear that Michael and the Reborn Company were planning on expanding their market reach and their territories all the way into the Queen's region. But Barkus couldn't help but think that this was a mistake. Why couldn't Reborn just stay in this territory and protect what they already have? In his mind, he couldn't help but think of the inevitable future when the Reborn Company eventually butts head with the infamous Flarecorp group that had just recently conquered Batroc Town. If they stopped advancing today, then they could have maybe 1 or 2 years of peace and prosperity before Flarecorp tries to invade Angora City. At least by then, they could have created some kind of defensive structure to try and withstand their onslaught. But by continuing to advance in the Queen's region, Michael would only meet Flarecorp a lot sooner than expected. Barkus just couldn't understand it. The Reborn Company had a lot of potential from what he could see. He couldn't just stand still and watch it fall onto an endless abyss. Ever since the possibility of Flarecorp invading the grafted cluster came about, I have been reading and trying to find out more about them. And what I saw terrified, Barkus said. They are fearless and relentless in their pursuit. They will not stop until they get what they want. If they conquer a territory, they will impose an iron rule. If the government opposes them, then that government will be gone. If a duke or a royal goes against their wishes, then they are disposed of. If a company is threatening their total domination, then that company is ripped apart. And if the citizens themselves are defying them. Barkus' words trailed off. Their army is built out of thousands of soldiers who go through hellish training from their youth. They have equipment that would make adventurers go green with envy. Even their top officers are known to be masters of their own weapons. And at the very top of the chain of command is a man from a very powerful family. He is a direct heir of the Oscorp conglomerate and he is using Flarecorp as a way to try and compete to become the main successor of Flarecorp. And it's working. He's slowly going up the line. Barkus became more and more disheveled as he spat out the words in his mind. Aren't you afraid? He asked Michael. But after all those terrifying words of warning, Michael just smiled. I want to build a world of comfort, he answered. I know that I can make a change. Real change. And there is nothing here in this world that can or will stop me. Barkus looked at the 12-year-old child and saw a sense of boundless confidence in his eyes. It was pure. He could see that Michael truly believed the words that he said. He meant it with the true fullness of his heart. And for some reason, Barkus started to believe him. He didn't know why he got this feeling, but somehow, he started to have faith in Michael. Ha ha ha. That's right, bro Mike. Tell him. Zion cheered. I'll punch those Blair Borps until their noses bleed silly. Ho ho ho, I don't know how many times I have seen armies greater than Flarecorp tumble and die because of one single man. Maybe a lot, maybe a little, I don't know because I don't remember ho ho ho. Grieve laughed out loud, with his hoodie falling backwards and letting Barkus see his true appearance. A skeleton? Barkus screamed out. Ho ho ho, yes, indeed. I am just a lowly skeleton. But I can agree with young Zion here. Flarecorp is no problem, ho ho ho. Fudge couldn't help it anymore and jumped onto the table, flipping the cards face side up and toppling everyone's chips. Huh. Should I have my shadows kill that Flarecorp guy right now so that we can finally play the game? Meanwhile, Barkus couldn't help but stare at everyone as if they were all crazy. They were treating Flarecorp as nothing more than a second-rate company. He couldn't understand where they got all this confidence from. They have a whole army, you know? And their officers are the equivalents of high-tiered knights. Barkis shouted. Don't worry, we have this guy. Zion said, pointing at the evolved red hobmanki sitting meekly at their table. This particular red hobmanki was one of the mankis that Michael recruited from Angora City. He previously worked for the Knights as a janitor, but after his awakening, became the current leader of a platoon in the Reborn army. Under Greaves' tutelage, the red hobmankis were constantly going through hellish training and practice just to become competent soldiers in the undead general's eyes. Of course, Michael implemented modern health and training techniques such as proper protein intakes, proper sleep and recovery, and also progressive overload of work intensity to maximize their growth. Although the red hobmankis didn't have a chance against the dragonborns individually, they would definitely put up a fighting chance against them while in a group. Even just 10 of the red hobmankis served as proper sparring partners of Zion. They were so good that Zion ended up inviting the platoon leader to come play poker with him, which was why he was here right now. We're still improving, but we will do our best, the red manki answered. Michael turned to Barkis. As you can see, we're ready for a fight. Barkis was still reeling from the shock at their indifference, but chose not to question it any further. Now, let's play poker. Fudge shouted. And soon, the group restarted the game, with a fresh new set of playing cards. Right now, there was a standoff against Michael, Zion, and the red hobmanki. All three of them were betting all of their chips for this final turn of the cards. It was clear that they all thought that they had the best hand in play, so much so that they were willing to bet everything they had and more. Bro Mike. I'll bet 10 hours of washing dishes. Zion shouted to his opponents. I'll do the same. Whispered the red manki. Michael smiled at his two opponents. Fine. I'll bet a single customized skill for this hand. All the Rebornians, whether they were playing snakes and ladders, Scrabble, or chess, turned towards Michael once he said those words. He was offering a free skill. Meanwhile, Barkis looked around, confused as to why everyone acted so seriously all of a sudden. Skill? Barkis looked at all the Rebornians around him. Surely, they weren't talking about the skill, right? After all, that was an inherent power that people have since their birth and only naturally awaken during the course of one's life. It wasn't supposed to be wagered or given away like it was some sort of coin. Really, bro Mike? Yosha. I'll be getting that 4-star, shadow transportation, that you guys have. I don't want to sit in a carriage for weeks on end. Zion said, his eyes filling with competitive fire. Even the red hobmanki couldn't help but gulp as he began to think about the skill that he was going to get once he won. Oh, this is a really high-stakes game, one of the spectators said. I want a skill of my own too. But I need to work a few more months before I can get an allocated spot in the boss time. Now that the nation of Reborn grew to the size of about 30,000 citizens and more, Michael couldn't simply just give out any kind of customized skill for the Rebornians any time they wanted. Back when there were only thousands of them, he gave away skills like it was bronze coins. But now, he was a little bit more conservative in his gift bestowal. If he didn't, then he would have to spend a lot of hours every day giving skills to Rebornians. So, he implemented a merit-based system for skills. Once they worked hard enough to progress the nation of Reborn, then they were entitled with a one-on-one session with him where they could wish for any customized skill they wanted. This became quite a good motivator for the workers, so Michael began to implement it with the other amenities in the nation. For example, people could get mithril artifacts, a year's supply of beer, or even a house and lot in the parched lands all through merit as well. Of course, the most coveted prize that anyone wanted was the customized skill. It was a total game changer for people who wanted to improve their skills in their field, which helped them gain more merit and so on and so forth. So, when he offered a skill as a bet, all the Rebornians were intrigued. Dealer, show the cards. Zion enthusiastically shouted, banging his fists on the table. The shadow orc then turned the 5 cards on the table into a face-up position, showing their value. Haha. Zion jumped, showing his 2 cards to Michael. Bro Mike, I got a 2-pair combo. He showed his cards, and the dealer confirmed that his 2 cards were definitely the same as 2 of the 5 cards in the table, making 2 pairs. Sorry, but I got 3 of a kind. Michael showed his 2 cards, a 5 of hearts and a 5 of clubs. And coincidentally, one of the cards on the dealer's table also had a 5 of diamonds, creating a combo of 3 5s. Ah. Zion slumped back to his seat, defeated. Now, there was just one other person on the table who still hasn't shown his cards. Can you beat a 3 of a kind? The dealer asked the red hobmanki. He looked shy to show his cards at first, but he eventually turned them over and showed a 2 of clubs and a 3 of diamonds. Those 2 cards seemed unimpressive at first, but when combined with the 5 cards at the dealer's table, showed a completely different outcome. The dealer had a 4 of hearts, a 5 of diamonds, and a 6 of clubs. The cards numbered 2 through 6 created a straight combo. The red hobmanki won. Whoa. Congrats, man. I won. The red hobmanki couldn't believe his luck. Congrats, Michael said to him. As promised, I owe you a skill. What do you want? The red hobmanki didn't even know what to say. A few seconds later, some of his manki friends and their platoon came rushing over to his side and began bombarding him with requests. Dude, you should get a cool sword skill, like Sir Jaku with his lightning slashes. The 4-star, electric slice, should be good, one of them said. No, he should get a shadow skill. Aren't the orcs so cool with their ninja skills? The red hobmanki listened to everyone's request, but none of them struck his fancy. He wanted something different, something that would help the platoon as a whole. I have a request, he said to Michael. Boss, I want to talk with my team without speaking, like telepathically. Upon hearing this, Barkus couldn't help but think to himself that there was no such spell like that available in the world, certainly not here in the backwoods side of the Queen's region. He thought Michael would immediately deny the request, but Mycov instead closed his eyes for a second before nodding. Okay, Michael said. 1 customized 3-star skill, military talk, coming right up. He raised his hand and immediately, a bright white light appeared on the red hobmanki's chest. It blinded everyone for a second before subsiding. What happened? Barkus asked out loud. But then, he noticed that the red hobmanki's eyes widened. He looked at the other mankis, who all raised their hands and created some sort of gestures at the very same time as if they were talking to each other. No way. He muttered. Are they telepathically communicating through a skill? Michael nodded. Yeah. I gave him a skill that allows him to become like a radio signal. Oh, I guess, you don't understand that, huh? It creates an invisible connection with his platoon members that allows them to speak with their minds. But, a skill, impossible, but how? Barkus couldn't bring the words out of his mouth. Shock wouldn't be the right word to describe his feeling at the moment. Distressed was more like it. He couldn't help but look at Michael and the Rebornians differently now. After the bet was over, everyone turned back to their own games and played like normal as if nothing even happened. He couldn't understand why he was the only one who seemed to be stupefied at the sight of Michael creating a skill out of nowhere and giving it to someone in just a blink of an eye. Was this normal for them? A 4-star skill given just like that. Before Barkus could even formulate a question, he saw a dark shadow ascend from the ground behind Michael. Slowly, it morphed into the form of an orc, similar to the one dealing the cards on their table. The orc bowed to Michael. Boss, the bandits are finally on the move. They have positioned themselves on top of the valleys near the Golden Road halfway from Angora City to the first settlement. Barkus heard their conversation and couldn't help but speak out his thoughts. Wait. Are those bandits wearing black handkerchiefs around their necks? The orc looked at Michael first, asking him for permission to talk. Once he was given a nod, he faced Barkus and nodded. Yes. They are led by a man that carries around a curved knife made out of reinforced obsidian. Barkus gasped, realizing who it was. That's Sleazy, from the Bastard Bandits. He's famous for leaving behind only empty carriages and pooled blood in his wake. You have to retreat your merchants now. Damn. They struck while the sun was gone with no help in sight. If they're in the middle of Angora City and the first settlement, it'll take at least 3 days before anyone could send reinforcements. Barkus gritted his teeth. I have been victim to this kind of scheme one too many times. He then looked at Michael and realized something. If you were able to find this out, then this means you have a way to inform your merchants about what's coming. What if you take a detour? But strangely enough, he was the only one who seemed to be panicking at the situation. Why aren't you saying anything? He asked Michael. Are you not worried that your merchants will get robbed? Michael shrugged. To be honest, my orcs have been monitoring those bandits for a long time now. And I am planning not to get involved in it because I want the Golden Road to sustain itself. Barkus looked at Michael. You're testing the limits of the Golden Road? Yeah, Michael replied. In the future, there will be a lot of other merchants traveling the road. I need to make certain that they wouldn't have to be worried about thieves robbing them during their sleep. This was inconceivable to someone like Barkus. Michael seemed extremely confident with the abilities of his men, with no doubt whatsoever. What are you planning? Michael then turned to the red mankey sitting at the poker table, with the other red mankeys still congratulating him for getting a new skill. Them. Barkus looked at the 10 or so monkey-like demi-humans gathered near the poker table. Although they seemed a little bit different from their normal species, there was no doubt that they were the red mankeys infamous in the Queen's region. As far as Barkus could recall, red mankeys had no talent for magic at all. They were the lowest-ranked demi-human in the entire world. And somehow, Michael entrusted the security of his fortune to them. It was unbelievable. Ho ho ho, I hope that you keep my musings in mind while dealing with those no-gooders, Grieve said to his students. Remember my first rule, what was it again? Ho ho, even I don't remember. TSK TSK TSK. I'll be sorely disappointed if you guys mess this up, Zion warned the red mankeys. Ugh, if only my sis has me on dishwashing duty tonight, I totally would have joined you guys. My juniors, Fudge declared, jumping on each red mankey's head one by one. You have been blessed by the good ninja. Go forth and deal with those baddies. After getting some slightly effective pep talk from them, the leader of the red mankeys codenamed Radio Man, faced Michael with a determined face. We are ready, boss. Please deploy us. Sure. Michael nodded. Hey Barkus. You want to go see it? Barkus looked at Michael. See what? And before he could even ask again, he saw Michael's shadow lengthen and reach towards his own feet. And before he knew it, he saw an entire world of shadow ascend from the ground and encase him in endless darkness with no depth whatsoever. A nauseating feeling overcame Barkus' senses, with his stomach churning upside down. He had to kneel on the ground and restrain his vomit before the shadow walls descended back into the floor, showing a completely different environment. 1 second, they were at the first settlement recreational building, and the second after that, they were at an open space with nothing but the starry skies above them and an endless flat plain with large boulders and plateaus littered everywhere. Barkus forced himself up, wiping the drool off his mouth. What happened? Where are we? He asked. He looked around and saw a perfectly straight road parallel to the horizon going from left to right. We're in the middle of the Golden Road, Michael answered. On our west here is headed to Angora City, while on the right leads back to the first settlement. Beside him was Michael and the 10 or so red hobmankeys, who didn't seem to be fazed at all from the sudden transportation that had just happened. Teleportation? Not just any teleportation, but long range and multiple targets too? Michael ignored Barkus' surprised expression and turned to the red hobmankeys. Are you all ready for your first mission? He asked them. If you are successful in repelling the bandits, then I will endow upon you a proper name to call your troops, the very first squadron in the Reborn army. The red hobmankeys looked at each other with excitement. Their eyes still showed a bit of nervousness, but there was a hidden fire within them that burned ever so brightly. Okay, if you're ready, take out your uniforms and do your final preparations, he said to the hobmankeys. They began reaching out into their shadows, taking out these gears and garments that would look extremely familiar to those who lived on modern Earth. The red mankeys adorned themselves in these beige and brown shirts and leggings, completely covering themselves with something that blended within the environment of the plains. They wore camouflage army combat uniforms. Michael had these especially designed for the first group of the Reborn army. And of course, Michael wouldn't forget the most important part of their attire, the weapons. These red mankeys were all talented in the blade. So, Michael had military knives made out of mithril artifacts attached to their belts for easy access. And as the red hobmankeys were finishing their preparations, Barkus suddenly looked out into the distance. There was a fast-rolling automobile coming directly from the west. The large R symbol painted on its side made it clear that this was Reborn property. It was only then that Barkus connected the dots. This is where the ambush is taking place, he whispered urgently. Yup. And those are our ambushers, Michael said, pointing to the other side of the road where a stone boulder was barricaded right in the middle of the path. Just behind the obstruction were these men numbered in the 20s who covered their faces with black handkerchiefs. Yet, their bloodlust and their greed was still spilling out of their masks. One of those men looked different from the others. His posture was intimidating. He wielded a weapon blacker than the night itself with no regard for his own safety, licking its blade just for the fun of it. That's sleazy. Barkus realized. They're gonna stop the automobile. And just like he guessed, as soon as the driver in the truck saw the boulders in the road, he immediately stepped on the brakes. A high-pitched noise screeched out of the vehicle as it skidded to a stop. The black handkerchiefed bandits strolled out of their hiding spots with swagger in their steps. They had confidence. Look what we have here, boys. Wow. A real-life automobile right in front of our very eyes, Sleazy said, pointing his knife at the driver. Oh we. Just the metal alone from this thing could set us up for a year, one of the bandits said. Are you kidding me? A horseless carriage like this can fetch for a whole lot more. Meanwhile, the driver of the automobile got out of his car and approached the bandits without even a sense of urgency in his eyes. Oh look, a yellow mankey. Sleazy said. I suggest you surrender now, my man, or else you'll have to change your fur to red. Sleazy and the bandits raised their knives, twirling it in their hands and showing off their mastery over the weapon. With 20 of them surrounding the lonesome Rebornian driver, they knew that it wouldn't take much pressure to scare him, especially since he was only a yellow mankey. However, they didn't expect the driver to actually give them the keys to the truck so easily. Here, he said casually, tossing the keys to Sleazy. Take them if you dare. Sleazy's eyebrows narrowed, suspicious as to why this demi-human looked so confident in the face of 20 bandits. Open the truck, Sleazy said to his bandits, tossing the keys. In his mind, there was probably a bomb stashed somewhere inside the metal container that would be triggered upon opening. That must have been the reason for the driver's nonchalance. Once the bandits got a hold of the keys, they quickly rushed over to the truck. However, their excitement quickly died down once they realized they had no idea how to use these keys and where to even put them. The bandits poked and prodded the key all over the metal vehicle, unsuccessful in all their attempts. After a while, Sleazy got impatient and ordered the driver to personally open the metal container. No funny business, he warned the driver. But the driver had no intention of doing so. He simply looked down at his own shadow, making him feel safe and secured. He used the keys and opened the back container of the truck, showing the bandits all the products stored inside. Once Sleazy was sure there were no bombs about to go off, he boarded the truck and marveled at all the loot he had just taken control of. There were crates and crates full of shiny, metallic armor devoid of any scratches or dents. Sleazy began going through the crates, inspecting the quality and make of these equipment to see their worth. His eyes widened as he realized what he held in his fingers. His usually steady hand started to shake with excitement. The other bandits eventually jumped up onto the truck and saw what Sleazy had been so stunned by. They began picking up chest plates, boots, and helmets. No way, this is dwarven make. Not only that, but there's raw Damascus steel here. In the bandits' eyes, this was even better than gold coins. After all, gold coins can be exchanged for anything. However, dwarven equipment could only be acquired in the black market. And even then, the quantity available there was only a very paltry amount. Even just a single crate in this truck could only be acquired once a year in the black market. And there were tens of these crates here. Looks like we hit the motherlode here, boys. Sleazy exclaimed. The rest of the bandits cheered and shouted. They began to pick out whatever equipment they fancied, sometimes clashing with other bandits and getting into an argument. Sleazy let them sort their own problems out. This was normal for them. But then, he noticed that all of them were inside the trucks. No one was outside watching the Rebornian driver. You idiots! Sleazy screamed, rushing out the truck. But when he looked around, the yellow hobmanki was nowhere to be found. In the endless flat plains, the driver seemed to have disappeared from thin air without any trace of his presence. Where did he go? He screamed, his voice echoing back endlessly. There was something suspicious going on. The other bandits were either too stupid or too greedy to even think of this as a problem. As long as they obtained all these treasures, then they didn't care about a single yellow manki. Tisk, fine, load up all these crates into our carriages, he said to the bandits. Damn. If only I knew how to drive this thing, we wouldn't have to go through all that trouble. The bandits enthusiastically began to unload all the crates full of dwarven equipment and Damascus steel. But as soon as the first crate landed on the ground, Sleazy suddenly felt the skin on his arms turn up. He sensed the presence of dangerous people. You have made a grave mistake. This is property of the Reborn Company. The bandits were startled, immediately dropping the heavy crates back onto the ground. They reached for their knives and brandished it in the air, looking around for the source of that voice. They realized that there were about 10 individuals surrounding them and the truck. They didn't know where they came from. They seemed to have appeared from out of nowhere, unnerving the bandits. Sleazy squinted his eyes as he recognized the unique faces of these individuals. Red mankeys, he said, chuckling. His demeanor quickly changed from wary to lax in a matter of a few seconds upon figuring out their species. They wore strange uniforms, but he would recognize that striking red fur anywhere. Surrender now and your sentences will be lessened, the red manki said to Sleazy. Ha ha ha, funny joke. I never knew you guys were comedians. I am serious, said the red manki. First violation, stopping an authorized Reborn vehicle without permission. That's 1 to 2 years in prison. Second violation, attempting to steal Reborn products. That's 5 years minimum. And third violation, which is the most grievous of all crimes, threatening the life of a Rebornian. That's 15 years in prison. The bandits looked at the red mankeys before, one by one, they began to laugh and jeer at the ridiculous situation they found themselves in. Ha ha ha. Are you sure you're not comedians? Sleazy asked, clutching his belly from laughter. What are you gonna do? There's 20 of us and 1, 2, 3, 10 of you only. And that's enough, the red manki muttered. Sleazy shook his head and gestured for his bandits to attack. One bandit licked his knife before rushing towards the nearest red manki. He thrusted his knife, aiming for the throat. Just then, the red manki soldier parried the knife with his own knife, creating sparks in their blades upon collision. The bandit's eyes widened, not expecting the manki to push him back. Just then, the red manki pushed his weapon upwards, making the bandit lost his grip on his knife. Before he could even react, the red manki took his hand and twisted it behind his back, making him scream out in pain. Grah! And in a blink of an eye, the bandit felt himself fall to the ground with both of his hands crossed behind his back. He only heard the sound of clinking metal before he found himself cuffed by the red manki. One bandit down, he reported. 2 other bandits flanked the red manki from behind, hoping to free their comrade from his grasp. However, the soldier seemed to have eyes on the back of his head as he ducked and avoided their lunges. With a swift kick through their legs, the two bandits lost balance and toppled on top of each other. Before they could get up, they felt their arms twisted into a knot before getting cuffed by the same red monkey. The soldier stepped on top of the stacked bandits and looked at Sleazy. 3 down. In one fluid motion, the 3 bandits were taken down and neutralized. The bandits stopped laughing. They didn't even see what happened. But for Michael, who was watching everything unfold from a vantage point on top of a plateau, this was just basic martial arts. Specifically, this was Krav Maga, a fighting style that he implemented onto the Red Monkey soldiers that increased their knife and grappling skills tremendously. Sleazy eyed the Red Monkeys with a little bit more caution once he saw 3 of his men get put down in a matter of a few seconds. "TSK, don't get scared of them," he shouted at the bandits. "We have the number advantage. Just do as we've always done." The bandits screamed at the top of their lungs and began to rush towards the Red Monkey soldiers. Their knives began to glow with the power of mana as they unleashed their physical art spells. Their powers reached the heights of 3-star fighters. Their attacks were made up of basic scrolls they stole from merchants, yet their execution of this spell was nothing less than deadly. One bandit slashed his knife to the Red Monkey's neck, with his blade creating sharp crescent waters that launched towards its target. Another bandit beside him completely disregarded the water crescent and rushed alongside it. This was a tactic that overwhelmed their opponents. Yet somehow, 2 other Monkeys came in at the right time for support. One deflected the water crescent, and one clashed with the rushing bandit. The original Red Monkey used this opportunity and rushed forward, with dust exploding behind him, and attacked the bandit who released the water crescent. He used the 2-star Krav Maga skill, Torpedo Elbow, twisting his torso and creating tremendous acceleration for his elbow. The bandit ducked and used his knife to strike back at the Red Monkey's elbow, using Water Pump to induce a powerful repelling force against the elbow strike. However, an invisible prismatic shield manifested around the Red Monkey, destroying the water particles from the bandit's knife. Without the repelling force, the bandit was forced to use his arms to defend against the Red Monkey's elbow. The bandit felt his whole world shake upon impact, with his arms completely shattered from the elbow. Unfortunately for him, the Red Monkey grabbed his head and pushed it down for a perfect delivery of a 2-star knee bomb. The bandit lost consciousness and fell to the ground. Once his job was done, the Red Monkey immediately rushed towards another bandit to help out his fellow soldier. The bandits may have the numerical advantage, but the Red Monkeys were somehow able to fluidly exchange and cooperate with each other without much friction. If one Red Monkey was just a moment away from being lacerated by 2 bandits coming with a knife, 3 more Red Monkeys would come at the perfect time and give support, repelling the 2 bandits before returning to their original fight. It was as if they were communicating with each other without talking. This was a very frustrating fight for the bandits, as they felt like they were fighting against 3 times the actual amount of Red Monkeys present. And it wasn't just their cooperation that made this a hard fight for the bandits, it was also their hard-hitting skills that seemed to come with endless combos. If their kick failed to land, they would pivot and punch instead. And if that didn't work, they would feint a kick before using the bandits off balance to tackle him to the ground. Each and every one of their moves were powered by a 2-star or a 3-star spell, creating a much more devastating attack. "Where the hell did these Monkeys come from?" Sleazy shouted out. "Aren't they a new company? How did they get these spells?" Their fighting style was too specific and too specialized for it to be a basic spell purchased in the public market. This meant that their spells must be something that the Reborn company made themselves. But that wasn't possible. As far as he knew, the Reborn company should only be a few years old at this point. It would take at least 4 decades to develop and perfect these kinds of unique spells. Damn it. They tricked us, Sleazy gritted his teeth. They must specialize in magic formulation as well. I thought they just developed armor and weapons. Sleazy watched as one by one, bandits fell to the ground unconscious. By now, their numbers were completely even, which meant that it wasn't long before they were subdued. In a moment of self-preservation, Sleazy slowly backed away from the fight. He quickly turned around and raced to the truck's front seat. His plan was to run away from this place as fast as possible. Yes, he would abandon the thieves, but he would be able to escape with the treasures from this truck as well. Surely, the boss would forgive him once he presented this loot to him. However, faced with the unfamiliar dashboard of the truck, he remembered that he was completely clueless on how to drive an automobile. He tried to smack the wheel, just like a horse, to make it run. Beep. Sleazy was startled, not expecting the horn to sound off. You can't run away. Suddenly, Sleazy saw the leader of the Red Mankeys appear on the front seat of the truck, just beside him. He immediately lunged with his obsidian knife, but the Red Mankey deflected it upwards with his own knife. Their weapons pierced through the roof, with the two fighting to push each other's knives. Sleazy smiled. I'm not like those shrimps. He pushed the Red Mankey's knife, creating a large gash on the ceiling of the truck, before being pushed down towards the soldier's neck. I'm powerful, Sleazy declared. With the knife just inches away from his neck, the Red Mankey used his other hand to take out something from his pockets. With the gold and violet wrapper torn from the top, the Red Mankey was free to take a bite out of the chocolate bar. Suddenly, a new force erupted from the Red Mankey's knife, allowing him to push Sleazy's knife back towards him. What? How? Sleazy screamed. With the Red Mankey's newfound strength, he began to fight back against Sleazy's attacks. Sleazy gritted his teeth and pulled his knife back before lunging it back towards the Red Mankey's shoulder. The Red Mankey tried to parry the knife, but found that his knife merely passed through the obsidian weapon. It was an illusion. The real knife was lunging towards the Red Mankey's neck. But just at the very last second, the Red Mankey moved back, letting the obsidian knife pierce through the leather seat of the truck. Tisk. Sleazy muttered, pulling back his knife out of the chair. The Red Mankey used this chance to leap towards Sleazy in the driver's seat, making this a melee fight. He tried to grapple the bandit, grabbing the seatbelt to try and strangle him. Python Constrictor, the Red Mankey exclaimed, with his mana pouring through to the seatbelt and reinforcing it with more power. Sleazy felt his neck constrain, struggling to pull the Red Mankey off himself. In an act of desperation, he used the 4-star spell, Slice and Dice, to cut through the seatbelt at the risk of his own neck getting cut. Blood poured out of his neck from a flesh wound, but Sleazy didn't mind. He immediately tried to skewer the Red Mankey's stomach, with the demi-human having no chance to escape. The Red Mankey saw the threat and immediately stepped foot on the gas pedal, with the truck accelerating from 0 km/h to 40 km/h in a matter of a few seconds. The sudden acceleration pushed Sleazy's seat backwards, allowing the Red Mankey to barely avoid the knife. With the demi-human on top of him, Sleazy was about to be defeated by a swift, elbow meteor, directed on his head. He kicked and squirmed, turning the wheel quickly to the left and causing the entire truck to skid sideways. One of the wheels ran over a stray rock on the road, causing the entire truck to tilt sideways, with the momentum finally toppling the truck on its side. With the car crashed, Sleazy used this chance to try and escape. He punched through the windshield, shattering the glass into a million pieces. He began crawling out of the truck, with blood pouring out of his forehead. He dragged his own body away from the crash, hoping to escape. But then, he suddenly felt a force stepping down on him. He turned around and saw the Red Mankey looking down at him, with barely a scratch on his face. "Who are you guys?" he asked them. The Red Mankey took a big breath, a little bit exhausted after that fight. "As far as you're concerned, we're your worst nightmares. Consider yourselves lucky that we're the ones you faced. If our orc seniors took on this case, your fate would have been a lot worse than death." He raised his feet high up in the air before performing a final, dragon's leg sweep, to Sleazy's head. Once Sleazy was taken care of, the rest of the bandits lost their will to fight and immediately surrendered themselves to the Red Mankeys. The Rebornian soldiers immediately cuffed them up with metal chains and subdued them completely. The Red Mankey leader looked down at his shadow and bowed as a sign of respect. "Senior orcs, "We request that you take these miscreants and send them to prison," he said solemnly, as if praying. It didn't take long before the red mankeys' shadows converged and coalesced into one big hole in the ground, right where the bandits were subdued. Their personal orc bodyguard, one whose job was to constantly protect a Rebornian they were assigned, transferred over to the bandits. They then used their shadow transportation skill to take them to the parched lands in a matter of a few seconds. After falling for what seemed like a minute, the bandits fell on their butts and saw the darkness around them subside into the ground. The world opened up to them, allowing them to see a large wall enclosing them in, about 30 meters in height, with barbed wires on top that prevented anyone from escaping. They weren't the only ones there. They looked around and saw other people wearing a uniformed orange jumpsuit, looking at them with pity. One of them approached the bandits. "What you in for?" he asked. "What, we tried to rob an automobile. We didn't know they were protected." The prisoner inhaled a sharp breath. "Tisk, TSK, we learned that the hard way. And it seems you were quite lucky you didn't see the orcs." "The orcs? Look at them," the prisoner said, pointing to a group of other prisoners who sat on the ground, grabbing their head intensely and rocking their bodies back and forth like a madman. "If you met them, that's what would have happened to you." After all that was over, the red mankeys approached Michael and Barkus back at the top of the plateau. "We have successfully subdued the bandits, boss." The red mankeys kneeled in anticipation, waiting for Michael's acknowledgement. "Congratulations," Michael said to them. "You have proven yourselves worthy to be the first platoon in the Rebornian army. I hereby give your group the name, 1st Division Golden Road Troopers." The red mankeys rejoiced. All their hard work had paid off. Just then, Michael suddenly saw a notification flash in front of his eyes. New evolution path found for the red mankeys. Golden Road Troopers. These red mankeys dedicate themselves to the safety and maintenance of the Golden Road. They gain a 150% boost in all attributes while in the presence of the Golden Road. They gain another 50% boost while riding in a fast-paced vehicle. Michael eyed the words with surprise. This new evolution path coincided perfectly with what he had in mind for the red mankeys. Chat JK4, did you do this? No. Upon their triumph against the bandits, the red mankeys achieved enough experience to evolve a second time. Your words of praise gave them a solid sense of identity and solidarity, which seemed to have pushed their evolutionary path into a completely different one from normal. His words influenced their evolution path? He looked at the red mankeys and saw them shoulder to shoulder, jumping around and celebrating this momentous occasion. They seemed to love the new title he gave them. This was a very welcome surprise, and one that he hoped to use in the future. He raised his hand and activated his supreme skill, Gift Bestowal. The red mankeys found themselves glowing with a bright white light, blinding them for a few seconds. Once the light subsided, they looked at themselves and found not much difference in their physical bodies. Yet, they felt an intense connection on their right side, towards the Golden Road. It was calling to them, beckoning them to return to their rightful place. They kneeled again towards Michael, this time with much more passion and zealousness. "We thank you for this gift," they screamed. Michael nodded. With their new evolution path, they were perfectly suited to become the protectors of the Golden Road. "Return to our headquarters," he said to them. "Naruto and Sasuke will give you your designated shadow orcs." Because their shadow orcs transferred the bandits to the nation of Reborn, they were now currently without a shadow. Also, seek out Shiina and tell her to call the centaurs. They will be your new teammates. Michael planned for the red mankeys to ride on the centaurs, creating a terrifying combination. After all, their new evolution gave them a 50% boost upon riding a fast-paced vehicle, and the centaurs qualified as one. He just hoped that the centaurs would work well and someday have the opportunity to evolve into Golden Road Troopers as well. But that was a problem for another day. He then used his own shadow clone and used it to swallow the crashed wreckage of the automobile truck, and the crates of dwarven equipment strewn about in the Golden Road. Meanwhile, Barkus, who watched everything unfold, still couldn't close his mouth from the shock. Sleazy and 20 bandits. Defeated. By none other than 10 red mankeys, who were supposedly the weakest demi-humans in the entire world. This whole trip to the first settlement truly opened his eyes to the reason why the Reborn company shot up through the Golden 500 rankings so fast. They had it all. Money and power both. It was then that Barkas slowly realized the magnitude of what he had just seen. If Michael could turn the weak red mankeys into these officer-level caliber fighters, then it meant that he could give any skill he wanted to anyone who wanted them. If that was true, then what stopped him from arming all the Rebornians under his control, civilian or not, to cast a devastating 4-star, meteor shower, skill at the same time? Nothing. He could do that if he wanted to. Not even a well-equipped army could stand a chance against 40,000 civilians casting devastation from far away. Only now did he finally realize why the Rebornians were so lax against the looming threat of Flare Corp. It's because they don't see it as a threat, just a roadblock. Back in the center town of the grafted cluster, Bullrun, Barkas' twin brother, found himself pacing back and forth with worry. As the days passed, the domination of the Reborn company became ever so clear. Their fast construction of their so-called Golden Road felt like a virus that spread even faster than the plague. Bullrun Incorporated sales were already down. It would only continue to plummet even further later. Just then, a resounding knock-knock rang out from his door. "Sir, you have a visitor," said Bullrun's personal butler. The door opened, and Bullrun saw a man who wore bright orange armor with flames jutting out from his chest. His presence alone brought a heavy, intimidating air in Bullrun's own bedroom. "Who are you?" Bullrun asked. "I am here on behalf of our glorious king. You may have heard of his company, Flare Corp." Bullrun's eyes widened. "I am here to discuss a possible agreement between our companies, one that would benefit both parties simultaneously." The man in orange armor smiled confidently. Bullrun immediately stood up. Perhaps they were the answer to his problems. "Are you here to deal with the Reborn company?" The man in the armor scoffed. "Who?" Bullrun thought that the reason why Flare Corp suddenly knocked on his door was because of the current progression of the Reborn company into the grafted cluster. After all, Reborn's expansion into the western part of Angora City would certainly cement their foot into the lower tip of Queen's region. Bullrun thought that this would pose a significant problem for Flare Corp, who clearly has plans to conquer Angora City in the future. But from the man's expression filled with derision and disdain, it seemed like they weren't even aware of the Reborn company's presence in the slightest. And even if they were, they considered them as nothing more than an insignificant pebble on the road. "Can I ask who you are?" "I am Hestu and I am in charge of Flare Corp's relations and management. I have come here as a messenger on behalf of our king to talk about a possible alliance between our companies." Bullrun eyed Hestu with suspicion. "An alliance? What would Flare Corp want with us?" "While it is true that a #486th ranked company like yours is too low to become allies with Flare Corp, we still consider your expertise in the grafted cluster as something very valuable in our expansion." "So, you are expanding?" Bullrun realized. "Yes. Once we have properly set our foot down in Batroc town, we will start rehabilitating the entirety of the southern tip of the Queen's region. Angora City will fall by our hands." Bullrun balled his fist, quaking from anger. "What will happen to me, to my company? We will subdue you by force, or you can surrender willingly and keep your life and your dignity. In my opinion, it is much better for you now to give up." "Screw you!" Bullrun screamed, grabbing the oil lamps, books, and ink pots from his desk and throwing it to Hestu. HPMH. Hestu's entire body went up in flames, creating a boundary of fire that disintegrated the ordinary objects thrown at him. "Guards!" Bullrun shouted. "Take him to our dungeon." The door burst wide open, but it was not the Bullrun Incorporated bodyguards that showed up. Instead, there were 4 more orange-armored men that entered carrying Bullrun's employees by their necks. These were his personal bodyguards, each with a 4-star realm cultivation. Yet, they were subdued by Hestu's men and being carried around like lifeless dolls. "Bastards!" Bullrun shouted. Stone Monster's avarice. He punched the ground, creating a stone mound on the flooring that reached in a straight line towards Hestu. As it reached its target, the mound exploded into stone rubble, revealing a giant lizard-like golem that had its jaws wide open ready to consume Hestu in one bite. However, Hestu's bodyguards immediately rushed forward, unsheathing their flaming swords from their belts and fighting against the stone monster's jaws. The monster tried to crunch down on the flaming swords, but found that its own canine teeth were melting into lava from the sword's intense hot fire. King's Flame Cross, the bodyguards shouted, releasing a miniature flaming crescent from their swords that intersected in the air. Upon crashing together, the two flames morphed into the shape of a flaming eagle, one that flapped its wings and dove towards the wary stone monster. The eagle burst through the stone monster's jaws and out its back, leaving behind a molten mess of lava that soon dissipated in the air. Bullrun felt the heat increase tremendously as the flaming eagle broke out of the stone monster and went straight towards him. He raised his hand, turning his entire body into stony skin defense. The eagle crashed into his arms, exploding into a ball of flames that propelled Bullrun towards the wall, destroying the cabinets filled with paperwork. Bullrun unburied himself from the splintered wooden planks. He coughed up blood as he looked up at Hestu. "If this is not enough, then I shall have your butler explain the gravity of your situation." Hestu gestured for his men to bring down an old man wearing a disheveled suit. "Sir," the butler said, crawling to Bullrun. "Our entire warehouse has been ransacked clean by bandits. Our men were left for dead." Bullrun gritted his teeth as he looked up at Hestu. "You guys have the bastard bandits under your pockets?" Hestu didn't speak, but the answer was clear. They controlled the bastard bandits. This was when Bullrun truly realized that he was only a pawn in the games of conglomerates. Companies like Flare Corp had all the power, money, and influence to do whatever they wanted, and small companies like him were of no consequence in the grand scheme of things. You now have two choices. Die or live. If you agree to join our company, then you will be able to transcend your current ranking. Becoming #460th in the world will be a guarantee. If you don't, well, you know what will happen. Bullrun looked at his employees, his bodyguards, and his butler. They depended on him. "What do I have to do?" he asked. Hestu smiled. "Simple. Our king wants you to take control of the grafted cluster as its sole provider. Defeat your brother and pave the way for Flare Corp." This was what Bullrun always wanted. But why did it feel so gut-wrenching now? But what about the Reborn company? Hestu shook his head. "I told you. These small companies are of no consequence to us. You need not to worry. We will send appropriate aid for you to fulfill your mission." He took out a small white pill and gave it to Bullrun. "That is a cultivation pill meant to increase your power in a short period of time. We will give you all you could ever need. Not only that, but we shall send you a Flare Corp products to sell to the general public. This will solve the problem of profit for your company." However, Bullrun was still unsure. "I don't think you understand the true power of the Reborn company." But Hestu wasn't listening. Bullrun could see it in his eyes that he was completely uninterested in dealing with a company he didn't even know. "Fine," Hestu sighed. "If you want more help, then I shall task the bastard bandits to help you, even the odds. I heard that an infamous bandit is quite good at stealing and robbing companies blind." "What was his name?" "Ah, yes. Sleazy." Meanwhile, Michael and Barkus returned back to the first settlement after dealing with the aftermath of the fight. The sharp-chinned man was still reeling from finally seeing the true value of the Reborn company. "Here I thought your ranking was a complete lie. Turns out, I think they undervalued you," Barkus said honestly. "It made me realize that your company has a future beyond this small part of the Queen's region. I think you can conquer the entire continent." Michael waved off the man's praise. "If you want, you could also become one of our allies." Barkus' eyes widened. "Really? I would be more than honored to. I've been planning on creating truck stops all along the Golden Road as a way to make the journey through it a little bit better. I want it to be filled with not only gas stations, but inns, stores, restaurants, and other such establishments. I think that your company could be one of those things. Usually, it takes a few days of travel to reach one destination to another, Michael explained. Because of this, a lot of travelers pack up a lot of camping gear and food for their entire trip. This costs them a lot of money to do so. However, I am planning on creating a little safe haven for travelers on the Golden Road. For each day of travel they journey, they will find a truck stop to sleep and recover from their expedition. They will find a place to sleep, a place to eat, and a place to replenish their gear. Barkus' eyes gleamed with excitement once Michael told him all of his plans about this truck stop in the Golden Road. He had never heard of such an innovative idea. Michael had already thought of a solution to a millennia-long problem in the world that no one has ever yet to solve. Amazing, this idea of yours is nothing less than extraordinary, Barkus praised Michael. Of course, Michael was borrowing heavily from the ideas in his previous world. There, it was normal to have truck stops or gas stations once every 100 kilometers of highway or interstate. People in this world were accustomed to traveling large amounts of time, camping in the woods and hunting for food to survive. But once Michael constructed these truck stops, they wouldn't have to pack up a week's worth of food in their inventory, saving them a lot of time and money. For the Reborn company, it would also make transportation a lot more efficient. After all, these long travels with Reborn trucks were sustained only through large tanks of extra fuel for the road. But if there were truck stops all along the way, then they wouldn't have to stock up on extra gas. What do you think? Michael asked him. I used to think that taking full control of the grafted cluster is my only path to success. I thought that if your Reborn company invades our territory, then we will lose our way of living. But I see now that I have been completely narrow-minded. Your ideas and your philosophy in life will completely change the quality of everyone's lives. It will change the world. And I want to be part of that. Barkus looked at Michael with much more respect and deference. Please let my company, Barkus Incorporated, become a subsidiary company of the Reborn company. Michael was a little bit surprised to see such seriousness come from Barkus. The man even kneeled in front of him, like he was some kind of royal. After all, becoming a subsidiary company was akin to being adopted into a bigger company. It was as if Barkus was allowing Michael to put him and his entire company under his own umbrella of influence. This meant that Barkus Incorporated would now fully follow the Reborn company's orders. Not only that, but they would have to share a tiny portion of his profits with Michael as dividends. No company would lower themselves to such an extent, especially not one who was already at the Golden 500 ranking. Clearly, Barkus thought that becoming a subsidiary of Michael's company was a lot more beneficial to him in the long run. He wasn't wrong. You want to become our subsidiary? Yes. I have a lot of resources spread about in the entirety of the grafted cluster. By becoming your subsidiary company, I can help you spread the Golden Road in the western region much faster than before. Michael didn't know much about the technicalities to something like this, so he consulted a professional in the business. Soon, Michael and Barkus arrived back in Angora City inside the Reborn company's headquarters. Michael knocked on Yuna's door, who seemed to have been busy playing Uno with Agnes and her demi-human escorts. Sorry to bother you, but I need your help. There's someone here who wants to become our subsidiary company. Who? She asked confusedly. Him. Michael pointed to the man next to him, Barkus, who wore armor made out of intertwined leaves and stems. Becoming a subsidiary company is no easy decision. Are you sure? She asked Barkus. Yes. There is no doubt in my mind, he replied with no hesitation. Yuna was satisfied with that answer. Well, you have made the best decision in your entire life. Michael may be a lazy Larry, but he will definitely lead you into a better future, she said, poking out her tongue at Michael. Hey! Michael felt offended. When was he ever lazy? She then invited them into her work office, which Michael specifically built for her style. As soon as she opened the door, Barkus felt the breeze of cold air hit his entire face, making him feel like he had stepped foot into the top of a mountain. Cold, he exclaimed. How is that possible? Yuna walked over to the metal box near the window and turned down the dial, weakening the cold breeze coming out of the air conditioning unit. This is just one of the perks of the Reborn company. Once electricity is spread in the Queen's region, you can also purchase one of these for your home, Yuna explained to Barkus. This specific unit in her room was different from a normal one because it didn't run on electricity. Instead, it was powered by Unity Mithril, which by the way, wasn't cheap at all to produce. All 8 elemental mana present in a mithril artifact creates a powerful explosive force that could be harnessed to become energy. And now, it was being powered for an aircon unit and lights around her room. Did I ever tell you you're high maintenance? He said to Yuna. Did I ever tell you my work for these contracts and legal advice cost a lot of money? She retorted. We're just even. Michael shrugged. Fair enough. Now, how do we go about completing the subsidiary company? Yuna raised her hand, levitating the quill in her desk. With a simple, contract creation spell, she was able to whip up a legal binding agreement that would allow a company to become Reborn's subsidiary. It only took about a minute before 2 identical papers floated to Michael and Barkus, detailing all the legal writings that would make their agreement solid. This means that your company is entitled to ask for help from Michael. For example, you can be entitled to own automobile trucks, dwarven equipment, and other such material or service that Reborn offers. In exchange, a portion of your profits will be sent to Michael as a form of dividends for all his help. Barkus nodded, agreeing with the terms written on the paper. I accept. Michael didn't even look over the pages and simply trusted ChatJK4 and Yuna to take care of all the legal work. Just simply sign here your name and your company's name, Yuna said to Barkus. Once Barkus wrote down his company's name, Yuna's eyes widened in surprise. Wait, Barkus Incorporated? Aren't you guys the hashtag 487th ranked company in the world? Barkus nodded before signing his name in the contract. Yuna looked at Michael in disbelief. You were able to turn a golden 500 ranked company into your subsidiary? Yup, Michael nodded before signing the contract as well. Yuna shook her head. At this point, she shouldn't even be surprised if the top 10 ranked company became Michael's ally. Once the agreement was finalized, Barkus immediately introduced Michael to all the resources of Barkus Incorporated. I own this entire farmland, Barkus said to Michael as they both looked over a huge plain field that had plenty of crops being tended by farmers. I own about 64% of all the fertile land in the grafted cluster, allowing me to be a majority provider of all produce in this region. Now that he was a subsidiary company for the Reborn company, Michael could now take full advantage of these farmlands to create local products for the grafted cluster. This will be perfect for the truck stops. I have a feeling that this place will be the provider for all the restaurants and taverns that are to be constructed there. Since the nation of Reborn was too far away here from the grafted cluster, it was much better if the products made here were made with local products. I'll have my agriculture specialists inspect all your farmland. I am sure that they can help you improve the yield for the crops this season. Michael instructed the Rebornians to send a team from the agriculture department from the nation of Reborn. In order to speed up the process, Michael personally transported them from the parched lands over to the grafted cluster through his shadow transportation skill. The farming team consisted of lamias, satyrs, and a lot of yellow mankeys. Their leader bowed to Michael and Barkus before immediately using their innate skills and spells to check the current state of the farmlands. The moisture in the soil is not ideal, boss. We'll need to set up a proper irrigation system to maximize the crops we'll grow this season. Boss, do we have permission to use magic to enhance the soil? Michael nodded, and the farming team immediately created perfectly fertilized soil in a matter of a few minutes. Not only that, but with the help of a few engineers, they were able to create an automatic irrigation system that cut the workers' burden by at least half, allowing them to plant more crops in a day. Barkus watched all of this unfold with shock and awe. He thought that the Reborn company specialized only in metallurgy and armor making. After all, that was what they were famous for back in Angora City. But the techniques the Rebornian farmers showed today were futuristic at the very least. After the farmlands were done being inspected, Michael and Barkus then went on to look at the livestock in their possession. There were large farms containing at least 1,000 cows spread across 3 large plains, 500 sheep near 2 mountains, and about 3,000 chickens being raised in coops. That was just one of the regions managed by Barkus Incorporated. All of these natural resources made Michael realize how Barkus reached rank #487th in the entire world. He was a big provider in food and nourishment for the entire grafted cluster. We also gain most of our income through exporting to other cities and territories that do not have a lot of space, Barkus explained. Angora City is one of those, but we are only limited to that city because the meat would often spoil after a long time of transport. Michael smiled. Not anymore, he said. With the modern techniques of food preservation as well as the fast transportation times of the automobile trucks, Barkus Incorporated could increase their sphere of trade by a very large margin. With the help of the more established Barkus Incorporated, Reborn Company was able to much more smoothly spread the Golden Road through the grafted cluster. About 13 of the 28 territories were finally connected to the Golden Road, with each one easily adopting the ways of the Reborn way of life. For example, comfort. Before Reborn introduced themselves to the grafted cluster, the natives of this region were a lot more isolated within each other. Not only that, but they simply depended on naturally grown produce from their own backyard to sustain themselves. But with the Golden Road and the construction of Reborn stores in each territory, these citizens were quickly introduced to easy commerce. They need food? They no longer had to hunt their own livestock to survive. They could just purchase preserved meat from the Reborn stores. They need water? They could just pump up water underground using Reborn water pumps installed in every home. The connection roads also allowed citizens from each territory to much more easily move across each other, creating more tourism and more commerce, increasing profits for the Reborn Company and all its affiliates. Angora City found itself with a lot more visitors coming from the grafted cluster, which was all thanks to the affordable taxi services that Reborn offered in every territory. And thanks to Reborn's help, Barkus was able to spread his agriculture and farming business further outside of the grafted cluster. Michael helped him get connected with the companies in Angora City needing fresh produce for their own products, which was delivered very fresh through automobiles. It wasn't long before Michael started the construction of the very first truck stops in the Golden Road. This was located in the very middle of the road between Angora City and the grafted cluster, which was coincidentally right where Sleazy and the bandits ambushed the truck. Michael transported himself over to the empty land right next to the Golden Road. There were Rebornian engineers and construction workers already working hard to create a stable concrete flooring for the entire establishment. "Boss." One of the engineers approached Michael with a blueprint. "This is where we'll install the gas station." The engineer used his skill, blueprint visual, to create a projection of the finished product onto the empty land. The gas station was exactly as Michael remembered back in his previous life. There were about 4 aisles of gasoline pumps, which could serve about 16 cars simultaneously. Below the pavement hidden underground was a very large gas tank housing about 30,000 gallons of fuel at full capacity. Even with the increased capacity, Michael estimated that he would have to send in a refuel tank every single day all the way from the parched lands to here just to keep the gas station running. He expected a lot of cars to go through this gas station. After all, it was the only one in this entire part of the Golden Road. And right next to the gas station was where Michael planned to construct different buildings. One section of the truck stop would be dedicated for parking, another section for inns and taverns to spend the night, and another for restaurants. This truck stop would be quite large, about the size of a small town once fully constructed. And once this truck stop was finished, Michael was planning on creating more truck stops along the Golden Road, one for each day of travel. He would have wanted to have the truck stops constructed simultaneously, but it was incredibly expensive to do so. The Golden Road already needed quite a large budget, and it wasn't even finished construction in the grafted cluster yet. I am quite poor," Michael muttered to himself. If Barkus, or any other company heard him say that, they would probably vomit out of frustration. Michael was on his way to becoming a large behemoth in terms of monetary power, one that could contend in the global scale. While Michael was busy dealing with all of the business in the grafted cluster, the Shadows of Reborn was busy dealing with all the behind-the-scenes stuff that was happening all around the Reborn territories. Their job was to spread eyes on all the corners that the Reborn company had its hands on. They used their unique clone and shadow skills to have surveillance over every single thing that was happening in their visible world, whether they be insignificant gossip from neighbors or large bandit conspiracies that threatened to disrupt commerce on a large scale. They heard it all. The Orcanine orcs, with their specialties in offense, were given the more aggressive tasks during ninja missions. This included infiltrating foreign territories, surveillance persons of interests, etc. The Orcupine orcs, on the other hand, were tasked with protecting Rebornians and their assets from any ne'er-do-wells with bad intentions. Of course, that distinction wasn't that strict. After all, with the expansion of the Reborn company into different territories, the Shadows of Reborn eventually ended up needing more members to keep their surveillance in many places. They recruited humans and demi-humans alike. As long as they had the talent for espionage, then they were allowed membership into this exclusive group. After all, there were some missions in which a spy was required, where one had to pretend to be a different identity in order to gain the trust of a group or a person. These expanded members of the Shadows of Reborn all had their own groups and their own superiors, but they all took orders from the orc chieftains, Naruto and Sasuke. Those two orcs ran the majority of the Shadows' day-to-day missions. All the major events that their spies and their shadows gathered throughout the day was filtered through their eyes and ears. Once they decide that it was important enough, then they would pass it on to the legendary ninja himself, Fudge. Boring. Fudge muttered as Naruto and Sasuke reported to him about the current affairs of the Reborn Shadows. Naruto kneeled and slapped his own chest. That is not all, Boss Fudge. We have just received word that an individual named Hestu has made contact with Bulrin, Barca's twin brother. Fudge raised his non-existent eyebrows, intrigued. Who is this Hestu? Judging from the paperwork hidden in his carriage, we have ascertained that he is a major officer from the infamous company, Flare Corp, Sasuke reported. Master will give me a pat once he hears about this, Fudge giggled. Tell me more. What did they talk about? Did they finally realize that our Reborn company is superior? Naruto and Sasuke looked at each other, both hesitating to talk. They seemed like they didn't want Fudge to hear what they had to say. Fudge jumped out of his seat and landed in front of the two. What is it? Are they planning on invading our territory or what? No, Naruto muttered. This is what happened. The orc chieftains began to tell Fudge word for word about the events that transpired in Bulrin's office. And as soon as they finished their stories, they felt as if the whole room had gone cold. The already dark dungeon they were in became even darker, as if being swallowed by nothingness. The temperature dropped below freezing, making them feel the coldness of outer space. What? Fudge muttered, his cloak fluttering in the non-existent wind. What did they say about Reborn? He asked again. Naruto and Sasuke kneeled respectfully. They didn't know who we are, Boss Fudge. The violet slime shook his head. No. What was that bastard's exact word? In response to our company, Hesta said, Who? Ha 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 ha, Fudge chuckled. Who, he said? How funny. Isn't it funny? The two orc chieftains gulped. They knew things were getting serious whenever Fudge's slimy body became more and more spherical. And right now, he was a perfect ball. He was mad. Withdraw all our shadows, Fudge declared. Boss? All of them? You heard me. Starting from now on, we will be dedicating all our resources to finally answer that bastard's question. Who are we? He asked. We are Reborn. We shall make him experience rebirth. Meanwhile, as the Reborn company reached its stride in conquering the grafted cluster, Bulrin experienced more and more despair as the days passed. Reborn's golden road sucked away all the potential profits that his company could make. Even their loyal customers were now choosing to travel the golden road and seek out more Reborn products themselves. His main business was gathering earth minerals, mostly stone, quartz, and marble, which were primarily used for construction in the grafted cluster. Since he owned a majority of the mountains and the mines in the region, he was able to have a monopoly in the business, which gave him free rein to set his own prices. However, ever since the Reborn company introduced their miraculous cement, most people chose to construct their buildings using that material instead. People were still using stones, but not as much as before. And because of that, Bullrun had to lower his prices to its true market value. This problem plagued him for days, causing a lot of lost sleep. Not to mention his own plummeting profits, he was also worried about what Flare Corp would do to him if he wasn't able to conquer the entirety of the region before their arrival. His only chance was the promised support they would give him, Flare Corp products. Thankfully for him, the first crates of Flare Corp products just arrived from Batroc town. About 100 carriages landed on the center town of the grafted cluster, with each one being colored with the royal orange color that Flare Corp was associated with. But before Bullrun could open the crates, he was approached by one of the messengers who gave him an itemized list of all the products delivered, as well as the price indicated there. "What?" Bullrun shouted out loud. "Why does it cost this much?" The messenger shrugged. "That's normal," he said. "Transporting these goods here takes a lot of time and money. It's only natural." If Bullrun had to buy these products at such a high cost, then that meant that he would have to sell it at an even higher price just so that he could break even. For example, Flare Corp salt, one of the most sought-after spices in the world, costs about a gold coin per pouch to sell. But in comparison, the Reborn salt being sold on the Golden Road was about half that price. No one was going to buy Flare Corp salt. This only made Bullrun realize how absurd and insane the Reborn company's ability was to transport products at such a low cost. A daunting realization came to pass. Bullrun cannot compete with the Reborn company's commercial products. There was no way to beat them. But he couldn't just give up. Flare Corp would punish him if he reneged on their deal. He would end up being conquered too. So, he swallowed his pride and knocked on his next-door neighbor, his brother Barkus. "Brother, listen to me," Bullrun said, walking into Barkus' office. "If we work together and unite our resources, we can defeat the Reborn company." But Barkus didn't respond and just looked out his window in solemn contemplation. "If you do this, then I will put in a good word for you in my meeting with the Flare Corp representative," Bullrun said, pleading. Barkus finally turned around. "You still think you can beat them?" the man asked, scoffing. Bullrun looked at his twin brother and wondered why he seemed to defend or even root for the Reborn company. Just a few weeks ago, both of them were in the same mindset of rebelling against their Golden Road. "Didn't you hear what I said? Flare Corp will conquer the grafted cluster whether we like it or not. But if we help them now, then we can be assured that they will take great care of us once they arrive." But instead of seeing his reasoning, Barkus seemed to ridicule his brother for such a thought. "What makes you think that the Reborn company can't defend against Flare Corp?" Barkus asked. "Brother, are you listening to yourself? Flare Corp is a major subsidiary of a conglomerate. The money and manpower they possess is not something that we peasants could even dream about. No matter how strong the Reborn company looks now, they will suffer the same fate as Batroc town. I'm just making sure that we don't." The two twin brothers, as usual, could not see eye to eye on their problems. One of them was awakened to the intimidating power of Flare Corp, and the other was awakened by the world-changing power of the Reborn company. Their perspectives on this predicament were even more contrasting than black and white. "So, what do you plan to do?" Barkus asked. "Conquer the grafted cluster and throw out the Reborn company? You think you can do that?" Bullrun gritted his teeth. "With your help, yes. And that's not all. We will have the bastard bandits on our side too." Barkus looked back at his brother. "The bandits?" "Yes. That's how powerful they are. Flare Corp bought their way into controlling the bastard bandits. And they are now willing to help us achieve this mission. I was promised that he will send in a major officer of the bandits, someone called Sleazy, the infamous night killer of the bandits. A raucous laughter came out of Barkus once he heard that. Ha 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 ha. That's the reason for your confidence? Sleazy? Yes, Bullrun answered, confused as to why Barkus was acting weird. Wasn't he terrorizing our merchants and our trade routes for a long time now? He will surely do so with the Reborn company as well. I have bad news for you, brother. Sleazy already tried that. And he failed. Miserably. Bullrun froze, completely shaken from this news. What? How can you be sure? I was there. I saw it myself. The Rebornians knew what was coming and foiled Sleazy's ambush. The man started pacing back and forth. His brother may be many things, but one thing he was not was a liar. This meant that Sleazy was truly defeated by the Rebornians. Then the rumors about the Dragonborns are true? Bullrun muttered. It makes sense. If they can defeat a strong caliber group like the Stone Cold Six, then Sleazy is easy pickings for them. Barkus couldn't help but laugh inwardly once he heard that. The best part about it was that the infamous Dragonborns weren't even the ones who defeated Sleazy. It was the Red Mankeys, who the Rebornians and the Dragonborns considered as their weakest fighting members. It doesn't matter in the end. Flare Corp will come sooner or later, and they will bring their full force. Bullrun reasoned. We have to move now and curry for their favor. Brother, join me. Bullrun raised his hand for his brother to take, but Barkus ignored him. I refuse, he said. I am already affiliated with the Reborn company. What? How? Barkus took off his long-sleeved jacket, revealing a tiny patch of embroidered symbols on the back of stitches. There were two symbols. One was the Barkus Incorporated emblem. But above that was the distinct R symbol of the Reborn company. No, Bullrun muttered. You became their subsidiary company? Bullrun treated this as a complete betrayal. He couldn't believe that his brother would subordinate himself to the Reborn company. There is a distinct difference between us, brother, Barkus said. You want to subordinate yourself to Flare Corp because you fear them. I do it because I believe in the Reborn company. We will prevail sooner or later. I wish you could see that. But Bullrun couldn't see it. In his eyes, the Reborn company was a freshman, a greenhorn, and a fledgling rookie compared to the colossal Flare Corp. Companies like them almost always end up being subdued by the bigger predator in the global market. I guess this is where we part, brother. Barkus raised his hand for a handshake, but Bullrun refused. He simply walked out of the room in silence, and with his head down in contemplation. After the confrontation with his brother, Barkus immediately looked down at his shadow and requested a meeting with Michael. A couple of seconds later, an orcupine shadow orc emerged next to him with a respectful nod. The orc raised his hand and enveloped the two of them in an endless darkness. A second later, the darkness dissipated and Barkus saw himself in the Reborn headquarters located in Angora City. He saw the white-scaled dragonborn that was always by Michael's side. You can go inside and talk with Lord Michael, she said. He entered Michael's office, and saw Michael tinkering with some cylindrical metal shape. What's up? Michael greeted him. Barkus then immediately told Michael about his confrontation with his brother, including the piece of information about Hestu and the bastard bandits. Flare Corp is trying to influence my brother into competing with you. They'll probably try to stop your Golden Road expansion into the grafted cluster soon. Michael looked down at his shadow and summoned Fudge. He entrusted his good old pal to take care of things like these, such as surveillance. Surely, a nosy Nelly like him would know about the behind-the-scenes development of Flare Corp. Fudge, what do you know about this? A violet pudgy sphere jumped out from the ground and landed in front of Michael's desk, displacing neatly stacked paperwork into a disorderly mess. What did the shadow orcs find? He asked Fudge. Huh? Oh, that, yeah, Fudge muttered awkwardly. I seem to remember something like that happening. And? Michael asked, expecting to hear a much more detailed explanation than that. I don't seem to remember what exactly transpired, ha ha ha. My juniors always forget to write things down, ha ha ha. Michael eyed Fudge suspiciously, making the violet slime fidget anxiously in place. "Don't worry, Master. We have this under control. We have started to infiltrate the bastard bandit hideout behind the scenes through our orc ninjas. We have also sent in a few of our own bandits as spies on the inside," Fudge explained, which seemed to have allowed him to avoid Michael's suspicious gaze. "You already found their hideout?" Barkus impulsively said out loud in disbelief. "Yes," Fudge answered. "They made the mistake of ambushing one of our merchants, so we sent in our shadows with them when they returned." "Hee, aren't I such a good ninja?" Fudge scooted over to Barkus, with his eyes filled with an expectant gaze. Barkus slowly and awkwardly put out his hand and patted Fudge's head. There, you're a good ninja." Hee, that's right," Fudge declared. But Michael wasn't getting sold on his cutesy performance. He leaned in closer and squinted. He caught a scent of Fudge's shenanigans all over the story. "That's it?" he asked Fudge. Hee, of course, Master." "Oops, would you look at the time? I have to go now, bye." Fudge immediately descended into the shadows before Michael could figure out his plans. Meanwhile, back in the center town of the grafted cluster, Bullrun found himself pacing back and forth in worry. It had been a few weeks since Hestu arrived to help him, but he had made no progress in uniting the grafted cluster into Flarecorp's banner. In fact, he was slowly losing his influence in business as everything was being swallowed up by the Reborn company. Hestu eventually returned from Batroc town, having reported to his king to expect good results in the grafted cluster. So, when he arrived in Bullrun's mansion, he was stunned to see Flarecorp crates just sitting around in a warehouse. "What's the meaning of this?" Hestu screamed. "Get me Bullrun. Now." Bullrun arrived in the warehouse with anxious steps. He bowed as he greeted Hestu, but the man didn't seem to be in such a good mood for pleasantries. "Why are you not selling these products? These are great items that would have sold a lot in other territories. Instead, you're just letting them rot in a warehouse. Have you given up in trying to conquer the grafted cluster?" Hestu was steaming with anger. "It's not that I don't want to, sir. It's that no one wants to buy them." Finally, the man stopped huffing and puffing. He looked at Bullrun as if he was sure that he heard him wrong. "No one wants to buy them? What sort of excuse is that?" "It's true," Bullrun insisted. "The prices that you have set for me is something that the market is not willing to purchase. Even with the Flarecorp symbol imprinted on them, no one is willing to buy an item that is twice more expensive than other brands." This was extremely confusing for Hestu. After all, he had calculated the perfect price for these products, which took into account the transportation fees, labor fees, and even insurance fees. These were supposed to be the cheapest items they sent out. Yet, people are calling it expensive? How could that be possible? Hestu asked. "It's Reborn," Bullrun explained. "They are selling extremely affordable products that everyone wants to buy." Bullrun gave Hestu a list of the price comparison between Reborn products and Flarecorp products. The difference was astounding. Even Hestu would be tempted to buy from the Reborn company at these prices. "How can they price it so cheap?" he asked incredulously. "One spool of silk fabric is only 500 silvers? That's local pricing. It doesn't take into account any transportation fees. Heck, from what I know, these types of silkworms can only be found in the King's region. And the transportation fees to transport this here is more than 500 silver coins." Hestu was completely dumbfounded by Reborn's pricing. "Now you understand my problem, right? The Reborn company is a formidable opponent in the market." Bullrun finally felt a little bit relieved knowing Hestu finally knew what they were up against. The Reborn company's golden road was an impossibly great boon for their profits. "HPMH, no need to worry so much," Hestu said. "If they're selling this low, then that must mean they are losing a lot of money selling these products. We only need to wait it out before they go bankrupt." But that wasn't enough to convince Bullrun. There was no sign of the Reborn company stopping any time soon. And for some reason, he never saw any financial problems from them even though Hesta said they were losing a lot of money. They even seemed to become even wealthier as time passed because their construction of the Golden Road was getting faster and faster. They were recruiting workers from the grafted cluster left and right. "I understand your concerns," Hesta said. "But not to worry. The king has allowed the FlareCorp wizards to help in this endeavor. They'll make sure to help us deal with this reborn problem we have. Biyutu too. Are ta. Huh? Did you say something?" asked Hestu. Bulren looked back at him with confusion. "I didn't say anything." "No, I clearly heard you say something," Hestu insisted. But Bulren and the rest of the guards inside the warehouse heard nothing of the sort. Hestu's insistence of a strange noise seemed to have changed their perception of him a bit. The next day, the FlareCorp wizards finally arrived in the grafted cluster. They wore bright orange robes with flaming wings on their backs. They were quite snobbish, choosing to ignore Bulren and chose only to speak to Hestu. These were 6-star wizards borrowed from FlareCorp's main army itself. One of their specialties was creating large barriers and domains that would separate a territory from the rest of the world. It didn't take long before they started to travel through all of the territories under Bulren's occupation and started to isolate them from the rest of the grafted cluster. "World of Burn," the wizards chanted, with a magic circle appearing in front of their hands. They concentrated for a few seconds before the magic circles lifted off their hands and remained static in the air. The FlareCorp wizards continued to create 4 more of these magic circles throughout the entirety of the territory, creating a pentagram connection between them. As soon as the final magic circle was placed, a large fire erupted from the ground and created a domed boundary that encompassed the entire village. The citizens were alarmed, but well-placed guards assured them all that it was a protection spell that would safeguard their village. They weren't technically lying. They were getting protected, but the main purpose of this flaming barrier was to prevent the Reborn Company from constructing their Golden Road wherever they wanted. The FlareCorp wizards installed these barriers over the rest of the territories that were yet to be infected with the Reborn sickness. Bulren was once again awed at the power of FlareCorp and their wizards. The amount of mana it will take to keep these barriers stay active was a staggering amount. They would have to concentrate for the whole day to keep this intact. Somehow, FlareCorp could make these well-accomplished 6-star wizards into mana dispensers like it was nothing. Michael was alerted as soon as these flaming barriers were installed. Instead of being mad, he became quite curious as to how they were able to create these magic stones in the first place. He immediately transported himself into one of these territories through a clone implanted by the Shadow Orcs. When he arrived, he saw a semi-transparent wall of flame that created a domed structure within the tiny village. Curious, he tried to put his hand on it, only for his absolute unity defense to activate as it tried to sear through his skin. Normal people wouldn't be able to get in or out of this place, he realized. He activated his supreme skill and observed the flow of mana in this wall of flames, leading him to a certain magic circle that floated in the air. "Magic theory acquired," ChatJK4 announced. "Timely as always. Thanks. Now, can you modify this magic spell so that we can use it? What do you have in mind?" "I want something that is not too hostile. I want it to keep pests and rodents out, but won't hurt them." "Are you planning on implementing this into the Golden Road?" "You know just how I think," ChatJK4. It only took ChatJK for a couple of seconds before it spat out an appropriate spell perfectly accustomed to Michael's wishes. Wall of Rebirth. Unity Element. This spell allows the user to create a physical barrier that will prevent any trespassers from entering or leaving. Any attempt to do so will result in them being burned with the power of the Unity flames. This was perhaps one of the stronger spells that Michael received from ChatJK4. With how it was described, he was even surprised that it was only rated as a 5-star spell. If he read it right, then that meant that he could create a similar barrier within an enclosed space. But instead of it creating a wall of flames made out of fire mana, this wall would be made out of Unity mana, which was much more deadly and cannot be extinguished by any normal means. Wow, ChatJK4. You've really outdone yourself. The reason that this spell is only rated as a 5-star spell is because it is not very practical on other people. The mana requirement to simply create a 1 cubic meter volume of space would be tremendously large, which is probably something only a 7-star wizard could do. Keeping the spell active for a long time is practically impossible. Michael now finally understood why it was so lowly rated. Practically nobody could use it. Of course, except for Michael. Good thing that my mana capacity is literally infinite. My limit is the limit of the entire world. As long as Michael was in the presence of mana, he could absorb them all for himself and use it as fuel to perpetually keep any spell running for an eternity. Michael immediately wanted to try it out. He teleported himself out of the flaming barrier and onto a desolate part of the Golden Road 100 kilometers away from the first settlement. There was nothing here but the endless concrete road and the flat plains of the grafted cluster. He raised his hand and cast his newly acquired spell, Wall of Rebirth. As he did so, the 8 mana cores in his body started to pump out billions and billions of mana particles out and onto his palms. But that wasn't enough to even form the outline of the magic theory itself. He had to gather all the mana in his surroundings, sucking them in like he was a black hole. The air started to blow in his direction, making his clothes flutter. The ground started to shake, with soil particles levitating from the ground. Precipitation from the clouds rained down on him, directly on him only and nothing else. And finally, the intense heat of the sun concentrated itself onto Michael's palms, creating smoke and steam flowing upwards. The mana particles in the surrounding were far more abundant than his own cores, allowing the magic circle to finally take shape. The writings on the magic circle were filled with wavy and geometric scribbles, dictating the magic theory behind the very spell itself. The edges glowed in a bright white light, signaling its finished construction. He gently pushed the magic circle, letting it float perfectly into the air just on the edge of the Golden Road itself. That was just the first half of the spell. He created another magic circle in his other hand. This time, the mana he absorbed from the surroundings were completely different from the 4 basic elements. Light, dark, lightning, and poison slowly but surely gathered themselves into Michael's palms. Some rose up from deep underground while others rained down from the very heavens itself, outer space. Once the magic circle finished, he pushed it onto the other side of the road, finally creating a closed loop. As soon as it took its rightful place, a translucent wall of golden aura emerged from the circles and spread out towards the outer edges of the Golden Road. It went as far as 1/2 kilometer on both sides and to the skies, creating an enclosed space on this portion of the Golden Road. Michael looked at his creation and was immensely satisfied. This was perhaps the first time that a spell took such a toll on him. He felt the mana from his cores constantly getting depleted by the magic circles and constantly getting replenished from his surroundings. He then picked up a small rock from the ground and threw it towards the golden aura. As soon as the rock touched the unity barrier, it was suddenly engulfed in a bright white flame that disintegrated its very structure in just a couple of milliseconds. There weren't even any ashes left from the rock. The earth mana was immediately cancelled out by the other mana supplied by the magic circles. Michael had no doubt that any bandit or wild animal that stumbled upon this road would immediately find themselves destroyed from their very cores. It's powerful, Michael thought to himself. Maybe too powerful. Now, of course, this did raise some concerns. After all, there could be a time when a person would accidentally touch the barrier and immediately find themselves without a finger. If that was the case, then this barrier would be a lot more troublesome than it's worth. ChatJK4, can you edit the spell a little bit so that it can recognize whether someone is an intruder or not? Is there a way to do that? Unfortunately, the criteria to identify someone as an intruder is far too vague and complicated for me to take into account for the spell. However, there is a way to identify someone as an ally or a friend. His personal AI assistant took a couple of seconds before presenting Michael with a new version of the spell. Gate of Rebirth. Unity Element. This spell allows the user to create a physical barrier that will prevent any unwanted trespassers from entering. Any unauthorized attempt to do so will result in them being burned with the power of the Unity flames. Those with authorization will be allowed entry and exit from the Gate of Rebirth. Only those who are in possession of a reborn shadow clone is granted authorization. Michael looked at this new spell and found it to be quite complicated. According to ChatJK4, this new Gate of Rebirth would only allow entry and exit from people who are in possession of reborn shadow clones. Shadow clones, as in my shadow clones and the orc's shadow clones? That is correct. After thinking about it for a minute, Michael finally understood. The thing about the shadow clones seemed arbitrary at first, but when taken into account what they possessed, then it made sense. The reborn shadow clones could access the Rebornian innate skill, Lesser Unity Defense. And if those clones are attached to someone that wasn't a Rebornian, then they were included in the Lesser Unity Defense skill, which allowed them to be unharmed by the Unity flames from the Gate of Rebirth. So, in short, only those that were Rebornian or had Rebornian clones attached to them could enter and exit the Gate of Rebirth unharmed. Then this means that I will have to start setting up toll booths. If Michael was going to be completely honest, he wasn't planning on creating a toll booth for the Golden Road so early in its construction. Of course, he planned to make it a business later on down the line when it was more established within the royal continent, but he thought that it would be much further later in the future. However, creating this Gate of Rebirth would necessitate him having to create a membership that would allow people safe entry into the Golden Road. For example, at the start of every town, there would be a toll booth to enter the Golden Road. Once they paid a certain amount, they would then receive one of his shadow clones to accompany them throughout the journey, keeping them safe from the Unity flames of the Gate of Rebirth. This was actually a tremendous idea, if not for Michael being a little bit hesitant in making people pay for passage into the Golden Road. After all, his initial idea for the project was to make the road as accessible to everyone as possible so that they would eventually be led down into the King's region and into the nation of Reborn. But if there was a toll booth for this road, then it was possible that people would be hesitant or even refuse to enter because of the fee. This was quite a dilemma for him until ChatJK4 talked some sense into him. Studies have shown that people are much more willing to pay a premium price for safety and convenience. You're right. I guess I have to stop thinking of the Golden Road as just a simple road. It is a guaranteed safe and convenient passage through all the territories in the royal continent. Now that he had the Gate of Rebirth, he could be sure that there wouldn't be any unauthorized people from setting up an ambush in the middle of nowhere and stealing any important merchandise. The sleazy and the bandits incident wouldn't ever happen again once Michael installed Gate of Rebirth all around the Golden Road. The best part about this was that there wasn't an obvious loophole that people could exploit. If they purchased entry into the Golden Road and tried to rob someone, then Michael would be immediately informed of what was happening. After all, their safe passage came from the shadow clone attached to their body. Now, Michael could give safety assurance to other people who passed through the Golden Road. Before the Gate of Rebirth, there was still a chance for non-Rebornian people to get robbed while traveling in the Golden Road. But now, that possibility was practically zero. For now, he planned on implementing the Gate of Rebirth and the toll booth in the road between Angora City and the Grafted Cluster. He wanted to treat it as a beta test to see if there would be any problems that would occur before he implemented it to the rest of the Golden Road. The only problem now was its construction. Having to concentrate on this magic spell was, of course, not feasible. Thankfully, he had an endless supply of clones that could fill in the role for him. You know what to do, ChatJK4. Please give me a clone skill that can supply endless mana in the Gate of Rebirth spell. Understood. Creating spell. Shadow Clone Battery. Unity Element. This spell allows the user to create a clone that fills in the role of a magic caster. Upon activation of this new spell, 2 parts of Michael's shadow immediately separated from his feet and latched themselves onto the magic circle. The shadow 3D effect brought on by the skill made the magic circle look more realistic, as if it was tangible in the real world. It didn't look like a hologram, it looked like a floating neon sign. He immediately felt the burden of mana lift from his chest, making him breathe a little bit easier than before. A weight had been taken away from his shoulder and transferred over to the 2 shadows, who kept on absorbing mana from the surroundings and keeping the magic spell active. The best part was that he could remotely turn the Gate of Rebirth on and off at any time he wanted. For now, he turned it off. There could be plenty of curious, innocent bystanders that could lose a finger because of this. He only planned to make it active once he completed this whole part of the Golden Road and finished the toll booth. That was the only way he could warn the travelers about the dangers of the Gate of Rebirth, without getting a Rebornian shadow. Nice, it works. Now, onto the hard part. He still had hundreds upon hundreds of kilometers left from this part of the Golden Road, which would probably take him a few days to finish if he did it all by hand. ChatJK4, any way that I could have my clones install these magic circles? Thankfully, such a thing was possible. He could simply just create all the required magic circles in one place and have his clones transfer them over to their appropriate spot, shortening the required time from 1 week to just 1 day. After Michael was done with the Gate of Rebirth, he went straight to the first settlement and seek out the Rebornian engineers for another project. Thankfully, Michael found a couple of A-class engineering talents from the grafted cluster who he recruited into the nation. So, while the rookie engineers continued the work on expanding the Golden Road, the more experienced workers started on Michael's new project, the toll booth. It's just a simple barrier that goes up and down. He borrowed heavily from his previous life, taking all aspects of highway toll booths and implementing it here. Seems easy enough, boss. Give us a couple of days and we'll have it done, said the yellow manky engineer. They worked quickly, already hollowing out the road to create the new foundation for the toll booths. Meanwhile, he was approached by one of the elders from the first settlement about a problem. We can't enter the other towns, he said. There's fire all over. We can't visit our family. The old man was talking about the flaming sphere barrier that Flare Corp put up on the remaining territories in the grafted cluster still not connected to the Golden Road. With people unable to go in or out, there was a lot of frustration building up among the citizens. Naruto and Sasuke emerged from behind Michael and also gave their input about the whole situation. It's total isolation over there, boss. Since no one can go in or out, people are having to rely on Flare Corp products to sustain themselves, Naruto reported. Ra-ta-ta. Sasuke shouted in anger. Even if the prices are a little bit more expensive than normal, people have no choice but to purchase from them. It seemed that this was one surefire way for Hestu to make sure that Bullrun's company was keeping its profits up. It was a slimy business practice, for sure. I'll have to give them another visit, he said. Meanwhile, back in the central town of the grafted cluster, Hestu and Bullrun were just given notice of their huge bump in profits in a single day. See? Hestu bragged, pointing at the papers in Bullrun's desk. It's working. The people are using Flare Corp products. But despite increasing his gains to nearly double its normal amount, Bullrun couldn't bring himself to celebrate. He looked out of the window and saw the outskirts of the central town being separated from the outside world by a semi-invisible wall of fire that prevented anyone from going outside. There were Flare Corp soldiers posted all around the circumference of the flaming sphere, preventing people from hurting themselves as they tried to sneak out of the territory. Doubt began to seep into his heart. This would definitely not be the first time that this could happen. If Flare Corp eventually arrived in the grafted cluster, it was more than possible that this forced isolation would transition from temporary to permanent. He didn't know if he would be able to live with that. But of course, he couldn't say any of this out loud to Hestu. The man was in control of the 6-star wizards in charge of maintaining this barrier. They could easily focus their attention onto him if he voiced out his concerns. Now that we have made sure that the Reborn company can't expand their business here, we shall slowly take back the other settlements from their grasp, Hestu said. I'm looking forward to it. After finishing his conversation with Bullrun, Hestu walked out of the mansion and back into his carriage. Unbeknownst to him or any of the bodyguards assigned next to him, there was a peculiar shadow that seemed to have attached itself to his feet. Beauty. Ra-ta-ta. Who is that? Hestu screamed, surprising his bodyguards. Sir, no one said anything. I heard it clearly, Hestu insisted. Someone is playing tricks on me. Guards, do your job and inspect our surroundings for any miscreants playing a prank. The Flare Corp guards looked at each other before awkwardly looking around at the empty streets of the central town. With the martial law in effect, there was no one out of the streets loitering about. They were all confined to their homes, creating an eerie silence that overcame the whole territory. This made Hesta seem all the more crazed since the guards heard not a peep from their surroundings. However, they still did their jobs and checked the corners for any intruders. They saw nothing. The coast is clear, sir. There's no one here. Just as then, Hesta heard another clear voice echoing from all directions. Talking to you. There it is again. It sounded like a child, a teen. The guards looked at Hesta with worry. They started to think that he was crazy. I'm not crazy. Hesta swore. I must have been cursed. It must be the work of a wizard or a mage that is out to get me. It wasn't long before the Flare Corps 6-star mages were gathered at Hesta's temporary residence. They seemed annoyed. They were already extremely exhausted from keeping the flaming barrier active all day that all they wanted to do now was to sleep. Yet Hesta summoned them despite it. Exorcise this malevolent curse. I keep hearing things, voices, they talk to me. The 6-star wizards immediately used inspect magic, curse identifier, and even find disease to check up on Hesta's well-being. All sorts of lights surrounded Hesta, with each one revolving around him and inspecting a different aspect of his very presence. Hesta's body began to light up as these lights entered his body. And as they did, the wizards could see an X-ray vision of his body with his bones, veins, and even mana cores visible from the outside. If there was any anomaly present, the lights would immediately highlight the problem for the wizards. But after a few minutes, the lights faded, meaning that the magic found no anomalies in his body. His mana levels were normal, his physical body was in tip-top shape, and there wasn't any kind of spell or magic that was casted at him by a different person. It seemed that the voices that he heard were all in his head, a product of his imagination. This can't be. Hesta screamed. We suggest that you return to Batroc Town at once and ask for your replacement, said the Flare Corp wizard. You don't seem to be fit for this mission. As soon as that was mentioned, Hesta aggressively pointed at everyone in the room. You will do no such thing. My liege, my king, will not hear of this in any shape or form. I will bring victory to Flare Corp and show that this problem is no hindrance to my abilities, that I guarantee. Soon, Hesta was left all alone in his room. The subtle sounds of drumming and strumming kept on beating in his head, preventing him from getting a good night's sleep. The next day, Hesta tried to act as normal as possible. However, he would often see shadowy figures and forms on the edge of his vision, only for it to disappear once he tried to look at them. This wasn't enough cause for worry though. That came a day later, when Hesta found himself becoming lost in a maze within his own guest house. The 4-bedroom mini-mansion became a kilometer long. He tried to exit the house, only finding himself back to his own bedroom. The windows outside were completely bolted shut, letting no sunlight shine through, with only the artificial luminescence of the flickering oil lamp illuminating his surroundings. Help! Get me out of here, he shouted, but his words came echoing back at him at full force. Every door he walked through seemed to lead him further and further down the path of insanity. Time seemed to blur. His consciousness became foggy. He just wandered this endless maze in a daze, opening one door and the other for an endless amount of time. He didn't know how long he had been trapped into this door, but after what seemed like an eternity, he finally found the exit. Help me, he said exasperatedly to the guard outside his house. I've been trapped, for months, years? I don't know. The guard looked back at him with a strange look. Sir? It's only been a few hours. The wizards were once again asked to examine Hesta's well-being. But aside from looking a bit haggard, the man was in perfect condition. His mind, however, is a complete mess. I was trapped there, I tell you. There's no traces of magic in the house, said the wizard. Having no one believe him made Hesta feel intensely paranoid about his surroundings. He couldn't even take a bath for fear of being trapped in that maze again, making him look even more disheveled and dirty as the days passed. After a week, Hestu's well-being deteriorated to the point that he wouldn't even go out of the house anymore. He kept himself on the corner of the room, hugging his knees and biting on his nails. His eyes were completely sunken. It was at this point that suddenly, Hestu saw darkness seeping out of the walls, covering its entirety. Shadows flew back and forth in the air, infecting everything it touched into darkness. In the end, all Hestu could see was an endless black void. He floated in this space, wary of his surroundings, before a giant figure came into view. It was a colossal violet slime. Hestu saw a large violet slime floating in the middle of the dark void. Its colossal figure gave a sense of grandeur that was almost godly in nature, as if this divine being had touched down from the heavens and visited the human plane. Who are you?" Hestu asked, his voice filled with confusion yet with a hint of wariness. He didn't want to offend this humongous being. After all, it was more than probable that they were the reason why he was here in the first place. "I am a ninja, a celestial," the slime said, its voice transferring directly into Hestu's head. "A celestial? What do you want from me? Get me out of here." Hestu struggled to push himself off to try and find a way out of the darkness, but found that no amount of force could displace him from his current location. It was as if he was trapped in the very air itself. "I am here to help you, my son, for you are treading a path that will make you stray from your true destiny," the slime said in an ethereal voice. "Why should I believe you? True destiny, what are you talking about?" The giant slime then grew a pair of stumps on its side, creating its own hands. A shadow from the dark void latched onto the slime's palms, morphing into the silhouettes of humans. Upon closer inspection, Hestu realized that those two human figures bore a great resemblance to himself. The one on the right was a replica of himself in his current state. He almost didn't recognize himself. His usually slicked back hair was a total mess, his eyes were sunken to the point that he looked like an emaciated ghost, and his dashing royal suit was stained so much that the Flare Corp emblem was completely disfigured. This version of himself laid down on the floor, hugging its knees and continuing to mumble unintelligible words. "This is the path that you are currently on," said the giant slime. "It is filled with suffering and torment. Doubt will poison your thoughts, making you question your very own sanity." Hestu remembered the horrifying hell he had to go through when trapped inside that maze. The worst part about it was the doubt he had in his mind at the very end of it. Did it truly happen, or was he just imagining that it did? But that is not your final fate. You can have peace and serenity in your life as well. The giant slime showed Hestu the other shadow replica. This time, Hestu saw himself sitting in a lotus pose, with a calm smile on his face. For a second, Hestu saw himself finally free from the voices in his head. But as soon as he was about to achieve this peace, he suddenly heard that familiar bu tutu and ra ta ta rhythm beating in his mind. "Why are you doing this?" Hestu begged. "Have you ever felt that you are meant for something bigger, for something more meaningful, becoming as cool as a ninja or as amazing as a spy?" the slime asked him seriously. The slime's words made Hestu be raptured in deep thought. After all, this wasn't the first time that he thought about this kind of question. He always thought he was meant for something greater, beyond the Queen's region, and even beyond the royal continent. This was the reason why he subordinated himself to Flare Corp in the first place. He thought that by following them, he could achieve his dream of becoming an influential figure in the world. "I do think of becoming more than I am. I don't know what a ninja is, but I want to take destiny in my hands and mold it myself," Hestu declared in a rare moment of courage. The giant slime looked down at him and smiled. "That is precisely your fate. You are destined to become one of the greatest figures in the history of the entire world. After all, you are one of my chosen ones." Hestu's eyes gleamed with excitement. He felt like it was only now that he was starting his life. It was only now through this celestial slime did he finally found purpose for himself. "I am one of your chosen ones?" Hestu asked, pride leaking out of his voice. "Yes. I have big plans that are in store for this world, and you are one of the lucky ones that are going to fulfill my wishes. Hesta stepped forward, no longer being afraid of the giant slime in front of him. Now that he was convinced that this colossal figure was not a malevolent being but a helpful celestial, Hesta felt even more in tune with his words. What shall be my mission in this world, O great slime? It was at this point that the giant slime stayed silent. In Hesta's perspective, it was as if the slime was in deep contemplation, as if he was peering through the different possibilities of the dimensions of the universe. But in truth, Fudge was a little bit caught off guard. He didn't expect Hesta to go along with his lies so easily. He might have acted as this all-knowing figure, but he was bumbling along the way, improvising all of the words out of his mouth. There is a great evil in this world, yeah, that's right. And it is our job to destroy it. Yes, that sounds good. Despite saying those words without the dignity and assurance that a celestial should have, Hesta didn't even question any of this giant slime's authenticity. He was too enamored with the promises and that the celestial was offering him to see through the lies. I see. I knew it, Hesta muttered to himself. Just like in the stories and legends of old, there is a great evil in this world that must be purged. And it is my job to help you get rid of it, is that right? Yep. That is exactly right. I knew I chose you for the right reasons. Then that must mean that there is a hero in this world that you have arranged, Hesta said, as if he was discovering a big secret of the world. Sure. It is not my job to ensure that this hero will succeed in his destiny and purge the evil of this world. Fudge heaved a sigh of relief. He didn't even have to do anything and Hesta did all the work for him. But who is this hero, Celestial Slime? How will I find this individual? Perhaps, is it the King of Flare Corp? Silence. The dark void shook upon the giant slime's shout. Hesta found himself stricken, having trouble composing himself. You do not want to anger me any further. I do not take kindly to your words. If you keep on spouting these falsehoods, then I cannot protect you from my own wrath. Hesta bowed deeply, kneeling in front of the celestial slime. He didn't know that helping Flare Corp was a crime worthy of death. I beg for your forgiveness, celestial slime. I shall not mention this again. While Fudge was having fun manipulating the events behind the scenes, Michael took it upon himself to liberate the people of the grafted cluster from the tyrannical rule of Bullrun Incorporated and FlareCorp combined. He descended into the shadows and arrived at a discreet corner of the street of the central town of the grafted cluster, one of the territories isolated from the world. He looked up and saw a flaming sphere covering the entire area, preventing even birds and clouds from trespassing onto their property. The whole town was divided into two sections. One was made out of wood and natural resources and the other was made out of stone. This was indicative of the two brothers' rivalry against each other, with Barkus controlling the wooded area and Bullrun controlling the other. Despite being the central town of the grafted cluster, the whole place was as deserted as Neo-Orcus before Michael arrived. People were hiding in their houses, barricading their doors and only peeking out their windows once every so often. There were soldiers stationed in each street, each of them wearing orange armor with flame carvings jutting out of their chests. Michael noticed that they were quite strong to be locals. Each of them had the strength of a 4-star warrior, which could be considered quite rare in the isolated grafted cluster. This meant that these soldiers were probably from the infamous Flare Corp. Lunchtime, one of the soldiers said, carrying a crate of dried meat and jerky. The residential houses reluctantly opened their doors and peeked out. Michael saw a thin woman come out from the door and beg the soldier for food to eat. Two little kids peeked out from behind their mother and eyed the food with longing. The soldier then took out a piece of jerky from the crate and motion brought it closer to the woman. But before she could pluck it out from his hands, he reminded her of something she completely missed. "Where's the payment?" the soldier asked. The woman hurriedly took out a few silver coins from her pouch and gave it to the soldier. Once the payment was received, the soldier gave her a handful of cured meat and beef jerky. How despicable, Michael thought to himself. Without any other merchants allowed inside or outside the territory, all the foods can only be found from Flarecorp itself. Michael used fabric manipulation, making the soldier's own handkerchief to wrap around his head. The soldier struggled and tried to shout out loud, but found that no noise came out of his throat. As he tried to take off the handkerchief from his head, he suddenly tripped backwards and hit his head on one of the crates, making him unconscious. The woman and her children looked on with worry as Michael came out from the corner. They were wary of him. But then, Michael commanded his shadow to float above the woman's door. The shadow opened up and created a portal back into their headquarters in Angora City, allowing 5 different crates of fresh fruits and food to fall directly towards her. The woman eyed the crates with wonder, with her children immediately picking up the fallen apples from the crates and taking a bite of each. She looked at the symbol stamped onto the crates. R. Once she realized what happened, she looked up and tried to thank Michael for his kind gesture. But once she did, he was already gone. It was as if he was never even there in the first place. Michael floated up in the air, looking down at the central town with a wide view. He used his supreme skill to sense the flow of magic in the air. The flaming dome surrounding them was filled with aggressive fire mana. The magic theory was constructed in a way that created the most amount of repulsive force. Michael squinted his eyes, seeing through the different dimensions of mana. Unearthed the layer of reality, he saw small strings of fire mana flowing down from the topmost part of the flaming dome. These strings all connected down, near Bullrun's mansion of stone. With his masterful sensitivity of mana, Michael saw the light mana signatures of all the people inside the house, including the 5 wizards whose hands connected to the fire strings of the flaming dome. These 6-star wizards were the barrier's source of mana. They continuously concentrated to keep the spell active. Now usually, disrupting a concentration spell would require Michael to physically disrupt the wizards casting them. He had to disrupt their focus, thereby changing the flow of mana into the magic circle above. But he didn't have to do all of that. He could see the invisible strings of fire mana connecting the wizards from their spells. He simply had to raise his hand and beckon the mana to flow towards him instead. The individual fuzzy balls of red mana suddenly found themselves drawn towards the golden-haired boy floating in the air. They went through their life practically invisible from the eyes of humans, yet it seemed as if this boy could actually see them in real life. They felt compelled to go towards him. Even though their very nature was linked to the wizards that summoned them, they couldn't help but disobey their own nature and follow the commands of this strange boy instead. 1 fire mana left the flow, then 2, then 4, and eventually, thousands upon thousands of mana strayed from the line. The moment this happened, the 5 wizards below were immediately alerted. They all opened their eyes and looked at each other. They saw all of them meditating in the same place as before. Disbelief started to paint their faces as they realized what had happened. Somehow, their concentration was broken without losing their focus. They felt their control of the barrier weakening by the second, making them cringe. It felt as if their own arms were getting ripped away by an invisible force. It was not painful, it was worse than that, it was shameful. They immediately got up from their seats and exited the dungeon underground Bullrun's mansion. They were placed there as a matter of safety and security, but it seemed that all of these precautions were for naught. The spell was still broken. The wizards ran up the stairs and forced themselves inside Bullrun's office. Why are you guys here? He asked them. The wizards, still catching their breaths, pointed towards the window behind his desk. Bullrun turned to the side and peeked out the glass. His eyes widened. He pushed his face closer to the glass, smashing his face against it. But he didn't care. He wanted to see if what he was seeing was true. The flaming barrier was flickering in and out of existence. The fire was turning into cinder before dissipating in the air. It wasn't long before the flaming dome flickered out of existence permanently, brightening the entire town as the sun finally shone above it. How did this happen? Bullrun screamed out. What am I going to do? Bullrun was at a complete loss. He never would have thought that Flarecorp's infamous barrier would suddenly disappear without warning. He turned to the wizards. Where is Hestu? Without Hestu around, Bullrun was left to his own devices. He was pacing back and forth in worry. "Don't fret," one of the 6-star wizards said. "We'll get the barrier up and running again soon." Even now, they had no clue as to how or why their spell was suddenly cancelled without any rhyme or reason. They just chalked it up to a freak coincidence of some sort. "Are you going to cast the spell again?" Bullrun asked them. The wizards didn't deign to answer such needless questions. They instead raised their hands to the ceiling and concentrated on their magic cores. Individual magic circles appeared on their hands as they commanded their mana to follow the magic theory ingrained in their minds. With their combined powers, they pushed their magic circles up in the air, allowing all 5 to coalesce into one bigger piece. The collisions of these magic circles seemed to have melted together, creating a much bigger slab that glowed in power. However, just as it was about to finish its fusion, the magic circle suddenly flickered in and out of existence. The wizards felt their connections to the spell cut off as if severed with a knife. Once it was without its source of mana, the magic circle eventually dissipated in the air, leaking all its built-up mana inside the room. The disturbance created a large shockwave that toppled everyone off their feet and even destroyed a few shelves. "What happened?" Bullrun shouted. The wizards all looked at each other. This time, they were sure that this was not a coincidence. They rushed out the balcony and looked up at the sky, towards the silhouette of a human cast over the sun. Bullrun followed behind the wizards and saw the anomaly in the sky. Who is that?" Immediately, the 6-star wizards cast flaming steps on themselves, creating a large jet stream from under their sawls. The force propelled them up in the air, confronting the troublemaker that somehow disrupted their magic spell. They were all wary as they finally saw his face. It wasn't a well-known wizard from the Guild of Arcana. It wasn't even a rival of Flarecorp. It was just a blonde-haired boy. "How did you do this?" one of them asked Michael. "It's easy. I just snapped my fingers," he replied to them with a casual attitude, completely disregarding the not-so-well-hidden hostility coming from them. "Don't lie to us, kid. How did you cancel out our spell? Did you use an elven relic?" Michael shrugged. "I don't even know what that is. I told you, I just snapped my fingers and lo and behold, I got 5 grown angry men coming at me." The 6-star wizards didn't take well to Michael's quips. If they weren't so wary of his mysterious artifact that allowed him to cancel their spell, then they would have thought of this as amusing. Their orange robes detailed with fiery symbols waved in the wind. The innate fire mana in their cores flared up, releasing an intense heat that was enough to turn the skies into a reddish hue. The combined power of not 1, not 2, but 5 6-star wizards was not something that a kid could simply shrug off. "If you're not going to tell us how you did it, then we'll have to find out whether you like it or not," they threatened him. Michael looked at all of them and sighed. "Fine, you want to see it? Then here, snap." He shrugged his fingers, and the fire underneath their feet was suddenly extinguished. Its wisps of flames flew into a string towards Michael before being completely absorbed into his body. Without the flames keeping them in the air, the wizards suddenly felt themselves falling in free fall. "Whoa! Aha! What?" It was such an expected result that they barely even understood what was happening before they were just mere meters away from falling through the roof. 2 of them were able to whip up the spell, Feather Fall, to negate the near-fatal falling damage they would have incurred. The other 2 were much faster than the rest and were able to recast flaming steps underneath their feet, slowing down their descent just in time. Unfortunately for one of them, she was not able to concentrate on executing the magic theory in her head before falling through the brick roofs of Bullrun's mansion. She fell through 2 stories down before crashing on the kitchen floor, creating a large crater in the marble flooring and surprising the maids and butlers preparing food. She was down for the count. The 4 other wizards felt their hearts pumping 1,000 times per second as they looked up at the lone child up in the skies. Michael looked down at them, with his hands on his pockets and with a carefree smile. How did he do that? That's impossible. This is impossible. My mana. It was taken away from me." They all looked at their own mana cores and felt a portion of it depleted. permanently. Usually, any mana they used while casting magic would eventually return back to their cores after some time. But now, they felt as if their cultivation, their mana core, had deteriorated to their previous state. It was as if their meditation and mana gathering for the last month or so was wiped clean. It would be a lie to say they weren't completely terrified. Terrified of losing their mana, as well as terrified of the boy who could somehow take their mana. See? I told you. Just a snap. Michael's voice echoed down to the four wizards. They were spooked. Encountering Michael left their fight or flight responses triggering every second. What should we do? One of the wizards asked. He's a child, why are we afraid of him? That's right. We're proud 6-star wizards of Flare Corp. We don't back down from a fight. Bombard him with our greatest spells. The wizards, with a renewed sense of vigor, flew up in the air to confront Michael. But this time, they didn't come close to him. They surrounded him with at least half a kilometer radius, making sure that he couldn't take their mana again. Meteor flares, one of them shouted, casting one of the strongest 6-star spells in their repertoire. Balls of orange fire shot through the magic circle in his hands, with each one leaving a trail of smoke behind much like fireworks. Lion's Pride, roar of ember, another wizard shouted. The head of a lion manifested out of the wizard's magic circle. It opened its jaws wide and roared towards Michael, exciting the mana particles in the air and increasing the temperature in a wave form towards him. Bastion of Balrog, the next wizard casted. A fire demon, made completely out of flames, burst into reality as the wizard finished his magic spell. This fire demon looked human-like, except for its hog-like face and its gaseous lower body. Upon its summoning, the demon rushed towards Michael, using its gaseous lower body to propel itself even faster than the first two spells. Lesser Phoenix's feather, the last wizard shouted. This time, large black feathers appeared from the magic circle. These feathers incinerated everything it touched, including the air surrounding it. And as it rushed towards Michael, large explosions followed its wake. With these 4 6-star spells coming towards him, even Michael felt a little bit of heat. As a 5-star wizard himself, the best spells he could use right now were only in the 5-star category. If it were any other mage, then there was only one outcome that this could go, and that was his own demise. But of course, he was different. He had a supreme talent that allowed him complete control over mana itself. He looked at the fire demon coming at him fast. Magic theory acquired, ChatJK4 said. As soon as he heard that, information washed over his mind, detailing all the tricks and mana flow of the fire demon itself. And as it turned out, it wasn't really a creature at all. It was just a clever construct of fire mana that made it look like a demon. He looked at its body and no longer saw just ordinary flames. Instead, he saw highlighted lines of mana that indicated the weaknesses unintentionally left behind by the spell's creator. He might not be powerful enough to completely take control of a 6-star spell, but he was surely strong enough to pick apart its gears individually. With a simple tug, Michael caught the very backbone of the fire demon, destroying the very flow of mana that allowed it to become physical in the first place. Soon, the fire demon's features melted into its own flames, turning more and more obscure as it reached Michael. In the end, it turned into nothing but a ball of flames, the equivalent of a 3-star spell, as it reached his location. An invisible prismatic shield appeared around him at the very same moment, nullifying the fire mana in the spell and dissipating pure mana that was soon absorbed by Michael. Not even smoke was left of its remains. What? The wizard shouted in disbelief as saw its spell get dismantled in the air. The other wizards were surprised too, but they chose to focus on their own spells instead. Whatever spell or artifact he used to keep disrupting these high-level spells was probably on cooldown after using it on the fire demon. This was now their chance to hit him square in the face. The flaming meteors numbering in the tens finally came close to Michael. Each one felt like homing missiles, following Michael's every move. In response, Michael's shadow suddenly separated from himself and morphed into an exact replica of Michael. Superior Shadow Clone. This was a 5-star version of the normal Shadow Clone spell, but this time, the clone was as close to being real as possible. Even the Dragonborns wouldn't be able to figure out which one was which. The meteor suddenly changed directions, following Michael's shadow instead. It seemed that this 6-star spell identified Michael's clone as the real thing. The meteors exploded upon impact towards Michael's clone, bombarding its absolute unity defense with great force. Just when the wizard thought he succeeded, Michael suddenly melted back into a shadow form and attached itself back to the clone. This was also one of the perks of Superior Shadow Clone. It allowed him to switch between the two seamlessly. Now, there were only 2 spells left. And coincidentally, both of these were area of effect spells, affecting a very large area and leaving no chance for Michael to dodge or move out of the way. Even his clones would be subject to its intense heat and power. The lion's roar came first, creating a large shockwave that emitted stronger and stronger heat, much like a modern microwave. This encompassed the entire area in the skies, dissipating the clouds. And if that wasn't enough, the black feathers positioned themselves 100 meters below Michael's feet. These feathers continuously emitted heat, creating a campfire in the middle of the air intending to roast Michael and all his clones. Michael's unity defense kept disrupting the heat and protecting him from its intense effects. However, the combined power of both 6-star spells became equivalent to a 7-star spell, which finally was enough to go through his defenses. Slowly, the mana in the prismatic shield were slowly whittling away, letting some of the heat leak through towards Michael. With the heat coming close to affecting him, Michael closed his eyes and concentrated. He instructed ChatJK-4 to create an innovative spell, one that would combine both magic and modern physics. He raised his hand and uttered, "Heat sink." He looked down at the central town below and commanded all of the metal to rise up towards him. The citizens were surprised as they saw their buckets, armors, and even kitchen utensils suddenly float up in the air and escape through their windows. People tried to jump and catch their prized metal possessions, only for their eyes to finally see the magical fight happening above. They stared in awe and wonder as giant magic circles floated in the sky, with the intense fire creating a reddish hue that painted the environment. As these thousands upon thousands of iron and copper materials floated in the skies, the intense heat from the 6-star spells slowly melted them into a liquid concoction. Michael took advantage of this and slowly molded them into his own design. These metal liquids slowly formed into long tubes extending across the skies. Michael made them as many as possible and as thin as possible with the limited metal he gathered. Then, Michael created ice-cold water inside these tubes, which flowed from one side to the other continuously. Because of convection currents, the heat from the 6-star spells were transferred over to the cold freezing water in these tubes, slowly turning it into steam, which then followed the tubes and flowed out of the spell's range. This was a heat sink, allowing the heat to naturally dissipate through the exchange of heat through the hundreds of tubes near Michael. The wizards were left speechless as they felt the temperature plummet. The prismatic shield that was slowly getting dissipated regenerated back up as the heat was no longer enough to destroy its defenses. How? With just a bunch of tubes, the wizard shouted in disbelief. With the heat no longer affecting him, Michael took a breath of relief. His modern knowledge of thermodynamics helped him this time. "That's science," he declared to them. Now that their 6-star spells were destroyed, the wizards became utterly vulnerable. They used up all their powers for those spells, but they all turned up useless in the end. Michael, grabbing his chance, raised his hand and pointed at the closest wizard in front of him. "TSK. Just wait, boy." Even if he could miraculously survive their attacks, there was no way a child like him could defeat all 6-star wizards like them. If they just waited a few more seconds, they could recast their spells again. But before he could move, he suddenly felt a strange power emanating in front of him. It felt like the whole world was shaking, trembling upon its presence. He looked up at Michael, and saw that the tip of his finger was glowing with an intense white light. He didn't recognize what kind of spell it was nor what kind of mana he used. However, that wasn't the source of that terrifying power, that soul-shaking pressure that made them feel inferior for the first time in their entire lives. That came from the strange metallic figure of an object floating above Michael's head. Unity Gun. Michael's strongest attack that could easily burst through any kind of defenses that a mage could conjure. The 8 elemental cores pumped out mana to his veins, creating a concoction of pure energy, one that could annihilate any kind of mana known to man. Now if he tried to release this unity mana as is, then the result of it would only be a powerful flame that surrounded his fist. But using his knowledge of his previous world, Michael could change the way his body distributed mana, its mana flow, and leverage physical and mechanical properties of mana. By mimicking the way a gun worked, Michael was able to store the immense energy of the unity mana and release all of it in one single go. Water, fire, air, and earth created 1/2 of the 8 elemental mana. Michael named those 4 mana as the natural elements. Meanwhile he named the group of light, dark, lightning, and poison as the abstract elements. Just by itself, the combination of the natural elements cancelled each other out, annihilating all of the energy conserved in all 4 mana types. The same went with the abstract elements. And by combining the natural and abstract elements, he was able to create unity mana, the ever-powerful force that was second to none. To make the unity gun work, Michael combined the natural elements and used it as the gunpowder of the bullet. And by rapidly striking this gunpowder with a primer like the abstract elements, he was able to create an instantaneous explosion as unity mana was created. And by changing the mana flow in his body, he was able to create a barrel inside his finger where the controlled explosion of the unity mana was directed towards. With the help of ChatJK4, the creation of this unity gun was as natural as breathing. At least, that's what he thought. Light flashed on the tip of his finger, it signaling the creation of the natural elements, air, water, fire, and earth. He just needed to strike it with the other 4 elements. But just as he was about to do so, he suddenly felt a strange power overcome his entire body. A resonating power, one that was alien to him and completely unfamiliar, jumped out of his chest and attached itself to the forming unity gun in his fingers. ChatJK4, what's happening? His trusted personal AI assistant scanned his entire body before its sights landed on his chest, specifically, his heart. Surrounding one of the valves was a metallic liquid of some sort that was the cause of this strange new sensation overriding his body. It's the Godforge piece, sir. It was suddenly activated as soon as it sensed the formation of the unity gun. Michael was shocked, to say the least. He thought that the Godforge piece was merely a simple piece of metal that was the same as any other material in the world. He even scanned its entire body to sense for any kind of anomaly or spell hidden inside. Even ChatJK4 was caught unaware of such a thing, or else it would have already warned him from the beginning and prevented it from entering his chest. All his scrutiny led him to believe that the Godforge piece was a normal piece of metal with a little bit of unity mana still left inside. But the power resonating from inside the Godforge piece was completely different and alien from any kind of power that Michael had ever encountered. Just the fact that his supreme skill didn't pick up on its presence meant that it was not made up of mana at all. Now, Michael would have been a lot more concerned regarding this strange new turn of events, but the power coming from the Godforge piece was actually reinforcing the unity gun in his finger. It was making the spell more physical, more real, if that made any sense. Just then, Michael noticed the strange looks that the Flarecorp wizards were giving him. They weren't looking at the bright white light coming from the tip of his finger. They were looking up. Michael slowly turned his head upwards until he saw a giant projection of the upper body of a feminine woman. Its entire face was made out of some kind of metal as shiny as aluminium but as immaculate as a diamond. Despite how unnatural she seemed, she looked at Michael with a gentle gaze, one that was akin to a mother looking down at her son. She had her hands spread out towards him, as if she was welcoming his very presence. He couldn't help but look at her face. He didn't know if he was looking at a very realistic sculpture or a real living human being. The difference was minute. He could even swear that he was seeing tiny movements and changes of expressions from her face as he looked up at her, but a second look would only make it seem as if she never moved at all. "Who are you?" he asked her. But she didn't respond. She stayed in the same state as she was before, unmoving. He couldn't even tell if it was a projection, an illusion, or a spell. It seemed none of those. It reminded him more of how his shadow moved through reality itself, except this womanly figure wasn't a shadow of a human, but the shadow of a figure that was beyond the 3 dimensions. He didn't know why, but he just wanted to spend the rest of his days analyzing this projection. It seemed as if he could answer the very questions of the universe itself if given enough time. However, time was not on his side. Michael's distraction with the projection above his head allowed the 6-star wizards to finally gather enough mana to conjure up another spell in their hands. Now that they knew Michael could defeat them all individually, they decided to finally let loose and combine their powers to take down this anomaly of a child, this monstrous genius that could even contend with the monstrous geniuses of those conglomerates. Their magic circles formed, shimmering and flickering in and out of existence. But they pushed through and completed the magic theory. All 4 wizards pointed at Michael from the north, south, west, and east sides. Their magic circles created a connection with each other, with lines and nodes appearing in the air and bridging themselves to make a sphere of magic surrounding Michael. It would only take a few more seconds before the wizard's spell finished, creating the dreaded 8-star spell, Phoenix's Last Stand, that could even destroy an entire city and level it to the ground. Just then, the metallic woman moved. It reached for Michael with its gigantic hands, guiding his Unity gun to point towards the skies. Michael felt the strange power of the Godforge piece bursting out from his chest and powering up the Unity gun to the point where he could no longer contain it in his body. His hands shook, and the light at the tip of his finger began to grow even brighter. Just as the Unity gun was about to burst, Michael heard a voice coming from above him. "Build me," she said, just before the Unity gun shot out into the skies. The Unity gun shot a beam of power soaring through the skies, piercing through the magic sphere that surrounded Michael. The wizards felt their connection with the 8-star spell break, severing the mana they built up so far. An overwhelming sense of exhaustion coursed through their bodies. They had completely used up all the mana in their cores, leaving them completely spent and tired. Just then, the skies emitted a bright light. Everyone looked up to see a single star shining in the distance, flickering like any other heavenly bodies before it. But after a few seconds, the star became ever so bigger and ever so brighter. Before the wizards could even wonder what was happening, a single beam of light instantaneously appeared, connecting the lone star in the skies and reaching down towards one of the wizards' stomachs, destroying the mana cores contained inside. But as it turned out, this beam of light had curved and hit the next wizard, and the next, creating an almost circular connection with the star in the skies. A macabre image of the wizards being strung up and skewered like pearls on a necklace became an image that would never leave the memory of anyone who saw it from down below. The wizards looked down at the beam of Unity light piercing their stomachs, before passing out from pure exhaustion and injury. All their years of cultivation and hard work was destroyed when the Unity gun pierced through their cores. The beam of light slowly dissipated, severing its connection with the star above the skies, which slowly lost all its luster and hid within the black void of space. The bodies of the wizards fell down from the air, plummeting at terminal velocity. Just before they crashed to their deaths, a shadowy figure emerged from down below and cushioned their landing, saving them from certain death. Michael thought it would be too cruel for them to die now that he had already crippled their power. He had his shadows wrap themselves around the unconscious wizards of Flarecorp and transfer them over to the prison in the nation of Reborn. Meanwhile, he himself stayed hovering in the air. He looked up, but the apparition of the metallic woman was already long gone. She disappeared as soon as the Unity gun shot off into skies. Her last words to him echoed in his mind. "Build me," she said. Her words were drowned out by the intense power of the Unity gun, that Michael almost mistook it for his imagination. But it was definitely real. "Who do you think that was?" he asked ChatJK4. There is no definite conclusion to that question. However, there is enough reason to speculate that the woman must be connected with the completed pieces of the Godforge itself. Perhaps that is what she meant when she said "build me." Michael agreed with ChatJK4's conclusion. It seemed that she was able to hide a part of her presence in the Godforge piece this whole time. And it was only when he used the Unity gun did she show herself. Unity Gun is the first spell that makes use of Unity mana. And it is also a combination of physical and mystical arts. Could that be the reason why she appeared once I used it and not when I used the other spells? There is reason to believe so. Michael looked down at his own chest. With a simple X-ray spell, he was able to see his own heart in crystal clear clarity. On the left upper chamber was the Godforge piece, which had wrapped itself around his heart. Just like before, this metallic liquid remained stagnant in his body, never moving, never radiating any kind of power. It was as if nothing even happened in the first place. If I used Unity Gun again, will she appear? It was unfortunate that Michael didn't understand what kind of power she used to hide herself in the Godforge piece. If he did, then he would be able to find out if she was still present in this piece or not. Nothing has changed with the Godforge piece. Logic dictates that repeating the same action with the same variables will result in the same effects. Michael wanted to try it out immediately. But he knew that this was not the time to do so. He still had to wrap up the loose ends in the grafted cluster. He slowly lowered himself down to the ground, with everyone's eyes locked onto him. Practically everyone in the central town witnessed the unexplained spectacle in the skies. Ever since Michael kidnapped their metal utensils in the air, everyone went outside and became spectators of the fight that unfolded. Even though this was the first time they witnessed the battle of high-level wizards, they knew that there was something different with the metallic woman apparition that appeared behind Michael. It was unnatural and natural at the same time. It was unfamiliar and familiar at the same time. Her presence made them scared, yet they could not rip their gazes away from her. This was the closest thing to a god that they could have ever seen. And because of that, Michael's presence became even more substantial than normal. They stared at him as he lowered himself down, making them wonder who he was in the first place. It would not be an exaggeration to say that this was a life-changing experience for many of them. But perhaps, one among them was more changed than the rest of them. Hestu was still looking up at the skies, with the image of the metallic woman burned in his memories. His heart was still palpitating with emotion, with excitement. There was a wholehearted belief in his heart that the metallic woman was nothing less than a goddess. This must be a sign, Hestu muttered to himself. The slime god was right. Meanwhile, Bullrun was on his knees as he looked at Michael as he touched down on the ground. He couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. 5 6-star wizards taken down by a single boy. And after looking at his golden hair and his warm smile, Bullrun was sure. This was Michael, the rumored owner of the Reborn company. After this realization, things somehow finally made sense. His brother had already told him the truth, but he just refused to believe it. The Reborn company was not a middling organization that was going to crumble under pressure. No. They were a company meant for the big leagues. They were a company that could contend with the very best of them, even Flare Corp. Seeing Michael defeat 6-star wizards handily made him realize how much he had underestimated this company. He thought those rumors of them defeating the Stone Cold Six, a group brought up by the Hephaestus conglomerate themselves, was a lie. But as it turned out, they were more than the truth, they were just the beginning. He had made a mistake. He had sided with Flare Corp thinking that this was the only way that he could survive. He thought this was the only way he could protect his and his employees' livelihood. But he had doomed it instead. The central town in the grafted cluster was finally free from the grasp of the tyrannical Flare Corp company. They found themselves looking over to the horizon and saw it with crystal clear clarity. In the outskirts of the town, there were still burn marks on the ground, evidence of where the flaming barrier used to be. People walked up to it and hesitated as they tried to touch the other side. They were worried for nothing. They could finally exit the town without the fear of being burned into a crisp. Huzzah! We're free, Mom! Finally, freedom! Their cheers and shouts echoed along the town. Celebrations were abounded. But of course, they didn't forget to search for the boy who made all of this possible. Michael. The golden-haired boy. His stature in the town became sort of a legendary figure, not just because he freed them from their gilded cage, but also because of that metallic woman apparition that they saw just a few minutes ago. So, when Michael announced to the entire town with a speaker audio spell that he was part of a company, the citizens of this town were immediately beholden to Reborn. With a booming voice that echoed through every corner of the town, Michael addressed every single one of them. In a while later, my men will arrive in this town and bring support for all of you after this ordeal. The reception to this was an overwhelming positivity. They raised their hands in the air in thanks for his help. Thank you. Thank you. We are honored. This whole town is in your gratitude. Just then, one of the citizens, an old man, approached Michael from below and kneeled. Please. I know that we are in debt to your assistance, but we have just one more favor to ask of you. Please kick out the traitorous Bullrun Incorporated. As soon as he said those words, the other citizens voiced their approval of the old man's words. When Bullrun Incorporated told them that the arrival of the Flare Corp wizards was cause for celebration, they believed him. When Bullrun Incorporated told them that the flaming barrier was for their own safety, they believed them. But after experiencing the tyrannical rule of Flare Corp, forcing them to buy only products from their company and burning any other brands into ashes, they knew that they had been duped. Their previous loyalty to Bullrun Incorporated was destroyed. They wanted him out and hoped that the Reborn company could replace them. Michael looked towards Bullrun's mansion in the center of the town. The huge manor made out of pristine stone material stood tall in the skyline. Yet, there were a lot of people knocking on their doors and climbing on the walls trying to get redemption against the man that betrayed them. He floated up in the and arrived at Bullrun's balcony. There, he saw the man in tears as he kneeled on the ground. Bullrun looked up at Michael and recognized him. I have betrayed my customers, Bullrun muttered with a hoarse voice. I took advantage of them and made them. Michael looked at him and commanded his shadow to open up a portal in Angora City. A couple of seconds later, Barkus, his twin brother, ascended from the shadow in the ground. Bullrun looked at his brother and tears fell even harder. You were right, brother. I should have trusted your words, Bullrun wept. Barkus felt sorry for his sibling, but knew that he had chosen this route. He had to bear the consequences of this choice. I'm sorry. You shouldn't say those words to me. You have to say those to them, Barkus said as he pointed out the window, where the citizens of the town were gathering at his gates. Bullrun nodded, wiping his tears. There is no way for me to atone this sin. It is only best for them to be in the hands of someone much more suited than me, and that is you, Michael. I hereby withdraw from my own company. Barkus looked at Michael with expectation. That's right, Michael. Please take Bullrun Incorporated into Reborn and make it your own. Please save the grafted cluster. Michael nodded. It is my honor. With both Bullrun Incorporated and Barkus Incorporated becoming subsidiaries of the Reborn company, he no longer had any roadblocks in spreading the Golden Road in the grafted cluster. Not only that, but the natural resources and assets that both of those companies held together will make the construction of the Golden Road a lot smoother than before. With that done, Michael had his shadows transport Bullrun and Barkus to the nation of Reborn. Bullrun voluntarily admitted himself to the nation's prison in order to atone. On the other hand, Barkus decided to move to the nation of Reborn for now to support his brother. This left Michael all alone in the central town of the grafted cluster. A few hours later, the Reborn automobiles and trucks entered the gates with a warm welcome from the citizens of the town. They stared in wonder at the horseless carriages and started to kneel as they rolled down the stone brick roads. Ah! As expected. Only he could create such marvelous works of metal, one of the citizens shouted. He truly is blessed. This must be a child of that goddess, another proclaimed as he pointed at a giant truck. And somehow, that kind of thinking stuck to the citizens of the town. They didn't think of the automobile as some kind of lifeless machine, but instead treated it as a living being that was conceived by that metallic woman that appeared above Michael. It didn't help that the headlights on the cars looked like eyes, while the bumper looked like mouths. Boss, one of the mankeys reported to Michael. They're saying weird things about our cars. Michael heard about it too and he didn't know how to feel about it. Sigh, just ignore them for now, he said to the yellow monkey. Are the crates ready to disembark? All the automobiles carried crates of food and other support items for the whole town after their forced isolation. Not only that, but Michael also had cement and other materials transported here to start the construction of the Golden Road. It is going well, boss. Though, our men are feeling quite strange with all of the people kneeling and worshipping the automobiles. Michael knew that this had to stop soon or else a lot of misunderstandings could happen. And one of the ways he thought he could solve this was through Fudge. Fudge, can you have your shadow orcs make some kind of illusion that will make them forget all about that metallic woman? Fudge jumped out of his shadow and immediately shook his head. No, master, that's too invasive. I'm not such a bad guy that I can just brainwash a lot of people. You're right, Michael acquiesced. Just convince them that the automobile is a lifeless machine. Fudge looked at him and just silently nodded with a smile. This made him a little bit suspicious of the supposed good ninja. I can trust you'll do this, right Fudge? The violet slime smiled again and saluted at Michael. Don't worry, master. Everything I do is for Reborn, he he he. While Michael was busy dealing with consolidating the Golden Road and the rest of the grafted cluster, Fudge took this time to appreciate this unexpected turn of events. Everywhere his clones touched, everywhere the shadow orcs were placed, all they could hear was gossip and discussions about what happened during that fateful day, that day when the metallic woman appeared and changed their whole lives. It was evident from the fervor in their eyes that they believed this as a miracle, a divine being touched down and graced them with their presence. And more importantly, this goddess only showed themselves through this golden-haired boy. Because of that, a lot of the citizens in the central town of the grafted cluster treated Michael, and subsequently the Reborn company, as graced by the goddess herself. This incident spread quite fast in the grafted cluster. Those that witnessed it themselves began telling it to the other territories, who began to believe the rumors once a lot of people corroborated the story. It was quite a strange phenomenon to see. After all, it seemed that this incident had caused Michael and the Reborn company's name to spread even faster than when they constructed the Golden Road. Boss Fudge. Shall we have our shadow orcs sow doubt and disbelief within the citizens? Naruto, the Orcanine orc chieftain, respectfully asked. Our men have already taken note of any individuals with fervent belief that the automobiles are made by the goddess. We shall use our illusions to make them disbelieve such a notion, Sasuke added. Fudge looked at the two shadow chieftains and tilted his head. And why should we do that? The orcs looked at each other, wondering if they heard Fudge correctly. Master has already told us to try and change that belief, Naruto reminded Fudge. Michael already told Fudge and the shadow orcs to subtly spread word that the goddess they saw was merely an illusion of a high-level wizard. However, judging from the look on Fudge's face, it seemed he had a totally different plan. Tisk, TSK, TSK, Fudge clicked his tongue. You guys are not thinking further ahead. Short-term thinkers, that's what you are. I, however, am a visionary, someone who sees the future and what it could be. The two orcs looked strangely at Fudge. What are you suggesting, Boss Fudge? Naruto asked, a little bit suspicious of the violet slime's intentions. I'm not suggesting anything, Fudge insisted. I'm just saying, we don't need to do anything. Don't make any illusions and don't change any minds. Sasuke leaned forward. But if we do that, they will continue to think that the metallic woman is some kind of god, and that Michael is their chosen one. A smile slowly formed in Fudge's violet amorphous body. Exactly, he muttered with quite an evil tone. A few days later, there seemed to be a new group that emerged within the citizens of the central town. They were made up of people who completely believed the metallic woman's divinity, to the point that they regularly looked up at the skies and hoped to see her magnificent figure once again. Although these people seemed crazy, it only took a few days before they had hundreds of members within their midst. They called themselves the Iron Maiden. This new group treated her as their savior. She was the one who sent Michael to save them from the tyrannical rule of the Flarecorp company. And because of that, they had an intense fascination with Michael and the Reborn company. All the metallic machines that the Reborn company had in their possession were immediately treated as some sort of divine object or even a product of the divine herself. One example of this was the automobiles. This became the subject of fanatical fascination from the group to the point where they kneeled in the street whenever one of them passed by them. There was even an incident where this group became enraged when an automobile accidentally crashed on the street. They became livid. They immediately alerted the Rebornians to the scene, wanting them to heal the automobile before it died. It was only that point where Michael was alerted of this behavior. I thought this was already taken care of. Fudge, he called out. The violet slime popped out of his shadow and flashed an innocent smile towards Michael. Yes, master? I thought you dealt with this already? How did this Iron Maiden thing escalate to this point? Fudge tilted its head like a dog. I tried, master. But it seems that this group is a lot more persistent than I thought. The shadows of Reborn are at a total loss. We can't get rid of them no matter what we do. Michael squinted at Fudge. I seriously doubt that. Didn't you know that their group is growing even larger now? What do you want me to do, master? There's too many of them. Of course, he couldn't really rely on the mischievous little Fudge. That was why he had his own clones spread around the town to try and see what was happening and why they were spreading so fast. They seemed too organized to be just an impromptu gathering of like-minded individuals. And as it turned out, they were being led by one man called the priest. Nobody really knew who this priest person was. Even when Michael attached his clones to the members of this group, none of them ever met with the priest himself. They only communicated through letters hidden in very obscure places. Fudge, who is priest? The self-proclaimed ninja shrugged his shoulders. No clue, he said. Really? No clue? Yep, master, no clue. As much as it pains me to say this, but even my powers are not enough to discover the identity of this priest. They are too elusive. They stay out of the shadows at all times, as if he knew that our members are hidden in the shadows. Michael simply didn't believe Fudge even a single bit. The violet slime may act as a doofus 99% of the time, but his skills in the shadows was the real deal. There was nothing that could hide from this ninja. He could force Fudge to tell him the truth, or he could even use his own powers to discover it himself. But for now, Michael let Fudge do whatever he wanted. As long as it wasn't too overboard, then he was willing to let the little slime have his fun. I just hope you know what you're doing, he warned Fudge. Of course, master. If there's anything that will hurt the Reborn company, then you can be sure that I will be the first one to stop it. Michael sighed and let the matter rest. Sometimes, Fudge was just too darn cute to be lectured. By the way, do you have any news about that guy called Hestu? He just disappeared all of a sudden. Fudge's body shivered for a moment, as if being seized by surprise. However, he quickly changed his own posture and acted like nothing happened. I have no idea, master. Well, it's time to go, hee. The slime immediately descended into the shadows before Michael could ask any more questions. Typical. Just a week's worth of travel away from Angora City was the town of Batroc. It used to be an independent territory managed by a duke, who was once known for his righteousness and his loyalty to the people. Unfortunately, he was stripped of his title as a new power took hold of the town, Flare Corp. Batroc town was connected to a lot of territories further down the Queen's region, serving as the main node that connected the lower tip of the Queen's region to the rest of the territories. It was geologically important, which was probably the reason why Flare Corp invaded it in the first place. What used to be a bustling exchange of commodities between local and foreign merchants alike was now a completely isolated town with a flaming barrier sphere that prevented anyone from going in or out of the territory. There were merchants from further down the Queen's region who tried to enter the town not knowing of its circumstances, only to be stopped by Flare Corp guards that immediately threatened to show force if they did not leave. The only carriages that were permitted entry inside were those that bore the symbol of flames that Flare Corp was known for. There was one such man that traveled all alone and tried to get past the guards. Halt. The guards crossed their javelins together to form an X. Only Flarecorp is allowed inside. The strange man then slowly took off his hood, revealing his face to the guards. And immediately, the guards' eyes widened with recognition, then with fear. This man was a major officer of Flarecorp itself, a man that was responsible for any and all dealings outside of Flarecorp territory. It was none other than Hestu. "Apologies, sir. We didn't know you were going to visit today." They hurried, retrieved their weapons and stood at attention. Hestu didn't say a word and walked inside the gates, with a portion of the flaming barrier opening up as he walked through the gates. The guards heaved a sigh of relief. Usually, a mistake like this would have cost them their jobs, or worse, their hands. But it seemed that Hestu was in an extremely good mood for him to not care about such things, which was quite unusual. "Phew, I don't know what's gotten into Sir Hestu, but we better thank our lucky stars we didn't get scolded," one of the guards said. Meanwhile, Hestu walked through the streets of Batroc town. And everywhere he looked, he could still see the evidence of the war that occurred when Flarecorp liberated this place from the Duke's hands. The stone roads had cracks and crates all around, making it hard for horses, never mind carriages, to stroll about the streets without tripping on one of the crates. Janitors were sweeping the remaining stone rubble and wooden splinters in the ground brought about by stray meteor spells hitting houses and buildings during the fight. Meanwhile, the citizens that used to inhabit these houses were only given Flarecorp meals and tents to get by in their daily lives. It was a travesty. Hestu quickened his steps and arrived at the former Duke's castle. The drawbridge was immediately lowered upon his arrival, with some guards escorting him inside. "The other officers are waiting for you inside, Sir Hestu. They are expecting great results," one of the guards said. Hestu didn't say a word and kept walking inside. As he entered the castle, he saw the whole place inundated with Flarecorp paraphernalia. There was orange, flaming barriers hanging up from the ceiling, there were orange carpets laid down to cover up burn marks on the floor, and the previous paintings of the Duke were taken down and replaced by pictures of a middle-aged man with a mustache wearing a noble orange uniform. The guards led him to the dining area, where the table was already filled with scrumptious meals enough for a whole village to eat. Except, there were only 7 of them sitting at the table. Strangely enough, the extravagant throne-like chair at the end of the table was empty. Their king was not present, unfortunately. "Hestu, this is an unexpected surprise," one of the men at the table said, raising his glass. "I'm guessing that the grafted cluster was primed for our arrival?" "Surprising if that is so," said the woman opposite the man who talked. "It has only been a few weeks." "Are you that good at your job?" she asked teasingly. Hestu took the seat at the front of the table, with all the officers of Flarecorp looking at him in anticipation. The candles at the table flickered, making the shadows in the room shake as Hestu sat in his seat. "So? Don't keep us all waiting," the man right next to Hestu said, tapping his foot. Hestu cleared his throat before nodding. "That is right. The grafted cluster is clear of any competition. Flarecorp can easily take this territory without using too much force," he said with a straight face. The other 7 officers showed elated expressions. They weren't surprised by the outcome, only that it came so soon. "What shall our next move be?" the man sitting next to the throne asked. He was the second in command. Hestu cleared his throat once again and gave a suggestion. "Since the grafted cluster is clear, then you don't have to personally send in your forces, Sir Arsonius," he said. "How about we send in our third in command to secure our foothold?" Everyone looked over to the woman sitting opposite Arsonius. She was Blazel, the third most influential figure in the Flarecorp organization. Arsonius looked at Hestu and stared down at him. "Blazel holds a very important piece that is near and dear to our king's heart. Are you sure that there is no competition in the grafted cluster and she won't be in any sort of danger?" Hestu felt a little bit paralyzed as the man looked at him. But as the candle flickered and flashed a shadow on his face, he became much more relaxed. "Don't be absurd, Arsonius. I can protect myself," Blazel admonished. "Or are you saying that our Flarecorp is afraid of a little competition?" Arsonius scoffed. "I am merely being cautious, Blazel. Our king has given you a very valuable treasure that cannot be replaced. It is of utmost importance that you do not lose it, lest we lose our heads. Blazel looked at Hestu with excitement. I'll have to ask you to guide me there, Hestu. Hestu nodded. Very well, Arsonius declared. Blazel will consolidate our power in the grafted cluster while the rest of us focus our strengths on defending our territories. We must take a firm foothold in the southern part of the Queen's region. The rest of the officers raised their glasses to Arsonius' words before they continued on eating the delectable food on the table. While the rest of the officers talked casually and ate their fill, Hestu excused himself to the garderobe, or the bathroom, for some privacy. The candles flickered as he entered the room. Hestu blew on the flames, leaving the entire place as dark as the night skies. And with no one else watching him, he kneeled on the floor and whispered. Priest here, Hestu whispered. I have done what you have asked of me, O slime god. The rest of the officers have no idea that your grace has already spread to their shadows. The progress for the Golden Road had gone smoothly. After the smooth handover of both the Bullrun Incorporated and Barcus Incorporated to the Reborn Company, thanks to Una, Michael was able to speed up the construction of the roads and infrastructure to get the entirety of the grafted cluster into the nation of Reborn. Bullrun's assets consisted of a lot of mountains and mines that were ripe for the picking, which was extremely useful since there was a lot of materials that were needed for the creation of concrete and cement. He visited each mine with Shiina, taking account of all the new resources that the Reborn Company had in store. There's a lot of iron, coal, copper, and limestone in this part of the mountain ranges, said Shiina as she wrote in her notes. One of the problems Michael had in expanding the Reborn Company was not due to a lack of money, but due to a lack of resources, both manpower and materials. All the metals and minerals that they used on a day-to-day basis were all sourced mainly from the Dwarven Kingdom and a couple of other mines back in the King's region. A good estimate for all the ores and minerals they excavated on a day-to-day basis was only about 10,000 tons daily. Now that may seem like a lot, but in the context of the entirety of the territories in the nation of Reborn, it was extremely small. About 7,000 tons of materials that Michael gets daily from the Dwarven Kingdom and other sources will be retained in the King's region where it would be used for the nation of Reborn. Even now, their territory in the parched lands was continuing to be built day to day. There were buildings, houses, and infrastructure that needed a lot of raw materials to finish its construction. Michael wasn't even taking into account all the requests from the cities and towns in the King's region who wanted to become a part of the nation of Reborn. They, too, want their territory to become as advanced as the paradise in the parched lands. However, Michael had to reject their proposals for now because he simply didn't have enough resources to do it. He didn't have enough raw materials to make it, and he didn't have enough workers to do it. He could allocate the rest of the 3,000 tons of ores and materials that he gains every day, but that would mean that he would have to stop his construction of the Golden Road. And for now, Michael prioritized his expansion into the Queen's region. In fact, he was already getting low on supplies after the grafted cluster was added into the branch of the Golden Road. He even thought that he would have to lay low for a few months to back up enough resources to continue his expansion eastward of Angora City. But after seeing all of the natural resources that Bullrun Incorporated had in their midst, he realized that he had found his solution. Good evening, sir. I know this is rude, but have we lost our jobs? As Michael was ruminating on the business of Reborn, he was suddenly approached by a few miners from Bullrun Incorporated. They had coal and grime all over their white shirts and brown pants, which seemingly hadn't been washed in over a month. Their eyes were reddened, evidence from spending 12 hours every day in the mines and inhaling all the smoke and powder inside. They had heard about the handoff to the Reborn Company, which made them unsure of their own fates. From what they heard, the Rebornians were blessed by the Iron Maiden, meaning that they would probably be replaced by those metal machines that they brought in the grafted cluster. On the contrary, I'm going to need your help now more than ever, he assured them. Michael looked over to Shiina, who walked forward and explained to the miners about their new job. How many men do you have in total? She asked them. One of the miners answered, we have about 1,000 in total, 300 here and the rest are spread around in the grafted cluster. Shiina dutifully noted it down. And how much do you think that you can mine in a day? The miners all looked at each other, a bit clueless in how they would answer Shiina. We can gather about 2 of those large containers. They pointed to a very large bin near the entrance of the mineshaft. Michael asked ChatJK for how much capacity those bins had. Each bin can gather around 200 tons each. That means they gather about 400 tons of ores and materials, Michael muttered, which Shiina jotted down on her notes. The other mineshafts can also gather about the same materials each day, the miner added. Once Michael added it all up, that meant that Bullrun Incorporated excavated about 1,200 tons of ores and materials each day. This was quite impressive for just a single company. The fact that they could gather this much material with very primitive methods spoke to how competent the company was in mining materials. He should have expected this. After all, both companies were ranked in the Golden 500 before they became subsidiaries of Reborn. Very well, Shiina said, putting down her notebook. Lord Michael welcomes you all to the Reborn company. Your first order of business is to officially become our employee, which means that you are eligible to awaken your talent if you haven't already. Not only that, but in a couple of days, our Rebornian engineers will come here and start construction of conveyor systems, drill rigs, and ventilation shafts to speed up the process of mining. Shiina began to go on a spiel about the benefits of becoming a Rebornian employee, which thoroughly made the miners completely overwhelmed. Talent awakening? Permanent residence in the nation of Reborn? Monetary benefits? These were all words that seemed too good to be true. Just trust Lord Michael, Shiina said to them. The miners all looked at their leader to see what he would do. And eventually, he steeled his resolve and walked towards Michael. We are already extremely grateful that we can keep our jobs. That is enough for us, he said sincerely. Michael and Shiina both shook their heads. You guys are now Rebornians. And we hold ourselves to a higher standard. He raised his hand and activated his supreme skill, gift bestowal. The miner was surprised to see his chest glowing in a bright white light. A warm sensation came over him as a disembodied voice whispered unintelligible words in his head. A couple of seconds later, the light subsided and the miner opened his eyes. There was a new glint in his gaze, a glint of understanding. There was power now in his body, power that had been bestowed onto him. It allowed him to sense the mana in his surroundings. It allowed him to intuitively gather them in his body, forming a very small crystal core in the depths of his stomach. Not only that, but there was now complex knowledge of geology embedded in his mind. Talent, A-class mineral resource collector. What do you think about your new job? Michael asked him. The miner kneeled. With the knowledge you have bequeathed and the technology that you are about to give us, then I am confident that we can give you almost 5,000 tons of ores every day.